be honest, this is more Israel pushing for Iran. But is that America's problem? That's a question. I mean, maybe the answer is yes. Maybe the answer is, you know what? They were wrong about Iraq. They were wrong about Syria. They were wrong about Afghanistan. They were wrong about the Taliban. They were wrong about Libya. They were wrong about the Arab Spring. They were wrong about Yemen. They were wrong about the Arabian Peninsula. They were wrong about the 9/11 hijackers being Saudi Arabian. But hey, 10th time's a charm. This time we're actually right. Yeah, you're going to have to earn our trust on this one.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Saturday, February 28th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. Well, here we are yet again. I can't even count how many times we've been in this position. Now, this obviously is a little bit more severe, at least as it seems in the moment, in regard to Iran, in case you haven't caught on to what I'm talking about so far in the first 5 seconds. It's just incredible how often this kind of dynamic can happen. The cycle, the same, element that's been lying our entire lives can shove a lie down our throats, or just a narrative. The same people can swing back around and support that narrative. And in the midst of that being put out, you're already starting to see parts of it fall apart. This happens every single time. And I'm not even getting into the, I'll get into what is dishonest and what's not, but what's interesting to me, just taking the Iran conversation as a whole, how many times we can discuss false protests and I mean, not just opinions, but getting caught. The very last time, if you remember, there was an intelligence asset that was caught on camera speaking with people. And there's more than one example. Taiwan, for example, we caught them being there. There was an example from, I could go on forever. The point is that we're all very aware that our governments surreptitiously manipulate foreign policy. And even the people that lie to you on social media about why that's not the case, I'd argue most of them know they're lying to you. And it's just a team play. But so we're in a position where we've watched Israel push for years, for decades, about Iran being the world sponsor of terrorism, at a point when that might have been sold to some people. World state sponsor, the leading state sponsor of terrorism. And I make this point every time. It's just becoming tiresome that you could take every argument they make at face value and compare it to, most of it being false, if not entirely, and compare it to what we can prove, not the majority, but what we can prove what Israel and U.S. have done in the world. Just those two alone pales in comparison. I'm talking about what they claim, what the reality is about Iran. And I'm not in any way saying Iran, good guy, U.S., bad guy. I don't think that. I think all the governments should be questioned. It's more about what you can prove, what the facts are, what they're truly trying to accomplish, what the outcome is. And what we can see is they've lied our entire existence about what they're trying to do to the world. And in almost every way, doing that thing. Of course, almost always saying, well, it's because they started it, or they did it first, or we have to do this to stop what they may do next. Preemptive strikes. And then you look around and you go, okay, well, where's the evidence that Iran is doing any of the things you claim you're doing? Well, they were funding Hamas. You mean the Hamas that Israel was funding, that we can all prove and talk about now? But not to get into that, nuanced as always, it doesn't mean Hamas, X, Y, and Z. The point, though, is you can make those allegations and stand back and look right in the face of the allegation and know right then they're lying. And it all just kind of continues forward. Or the Houthis, who stood out so far as being the one element, like seemingly in the entire world, willing to stand up for international law, for the good, right, or wrong thing to stop Israel for, in regard to Gaza. But they're the terrorists we're supposed to stop them from supporting? Or the Houthis, Hezbollah in Lebanon, a movement that has risen because of what they're doing. You could make the points about almost every one of the countries we're discussing. We just went over talking about rapid support forces and any number of these groups that have been created because of their belligerent foreign policy. Now, I digress. You can go on in 1,000 directions about what the U.S. has done to the world, what Israel has done through the U.S. to the world. Iran being bombed the way it just was and the way that it started was built on nothing but absolute dishonesty. And the craziest part is that the entirety of this country, and majority sense, seems to be very, very well aware of that. And the point that I always come back around to on this is that if we know that, and I'm not talking about polls, I'm talking about just using your common sense and looking at what major people on every side of the conversation are saying. And I've never seen a more unpopular war. And I mean that. And with that, we still have this happening. So there's two things to take away from that, most importantly. So democracy, if we can just laugh that out the window, if we're going to pretend that the vast majority can want something or not want something, and they can go, we don't care, and do it anyway. Number two is that you have to genuinely ask yourself why Trump would do that. And it's not about Trump alone. It's about our government, and always the forever point. So, I mean, really just, you could you point to a date when I argue this started, but in our existence, the reality of how our government is always operated, which is that it is being, at the very least, influenced by a foreign power. And I mean, like, to the point of, like, surreptitiously, like manipulating policy, to the point of possible outright control. And I think Americans are genuinely asking this question. But if you can look at what he did, look at how unpopular it is, look at how it makes him look bad, look at how it hurts his chances in the midterms, look at every single point you would argue is good politics, as much as that is a dirty word to me, and then go, why would he do this then? I think you know the answer to that, guys. I think the entire country is very uncomfortably coming to terms with what this shows us. And so what we're going to go through today is the reality of that, the reality of what just happened in Iran, the lies bubbling over through the whole thing, and some really strange anomalies on top of all of it. For example, it's being reported that the video that was put out and widely shared of Donald Trump announcing what happened, the 8-minute video, it's apparently artificial intelligence. Apparently it's a deep fake. Or they're lying to you, or Grok is lying, or it happened and it was just because he was tired that night, or it means nothing, or it means everything. Apparently, this is not some small part of the story, but I'm wondering, is it even important to include? Is it meant to distract from the reality of their shockingly illegal actions in Iran? Because shouldn't that be the only story in being discussed? They broke the law, guys. Well, Congress hasn't done, yes, we know. They are bad. Still doesn't mean they didn't break the law, right? So was there congressional approval? No. Okay, is there supposed to be? Yes. Did they get it? No. Did they bomb? Yes. So that's a crime, right? No. Congress hasn't. No. Yes. The answer is yes. Then you can explain why you think that Congress should have done this or why they haven't done that. But they broke the law. And yeah, so did Biden, so did Bush, so did Obama. But so are we going to go, who cares? Because that, and let the government continue to tailspin, continue to be stolen? The reality is they broke the law. As I've always said over the years, my God, forest for the trees, guys. That's a crime right there. A major, massive international violation. And we have to care about that, whether it's Trump or Biden or anybody else. And now they're going to keep pushing forward despite most Americans not wanting this. And this is going to get very dangerous. Now, the AI part of this might mean that there's more to the story. If that's actually the reality, is Khamenei dead? One side claims yes, one side claims no. Some people are claiming Netanyahu has fled the country and he's being turned away from certain places. We'll go through all this today. To me, it's just crazy where we are with the design of how unfocused everything is. That's the mainstream alternative media. Let's just name it what it is, guys. That is the anomaly. What we were doing around this before, there's always been misinformation. There's always been dumb people out there getting it wrong, or manipulative people just to get clicks and shares, or people who just like to watch the world burn. I don't know what you call all of that, but they're out here deliberately. And I mean, I actually genuinely think what's happening with the mainstream alternative media is design. I don't think these jackals even know that they're involved in it. They seem to be able to barely tie their shoes, but they're being chosen. And I think through some kind of intelligence manipulation, the way that these stories are coming out, the way that the lies are coming out. I mean, it gets all so abstract, but it's just nonstop, relentless lies on top of the story. So I want to go through this as best I can and look at what we can prove and try our best to keep in our mind that this, and this may sound crazy, and I don't even think this is the reality, but consider in our minds that maybe all of this is false. Maybe none of it is happening. I don't think that. But I mean, keep that kind of thought in your mind, because that's genuinely where we are. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then that's just too bad. That's the way the world is operating today. You know that they're out there trying to deceive you. They're putting out false information for the sole purpose of just to muddy the waters, or some cases to convince you a different thing is happening. But we have to start asking ourselves this in every situation, and then not assuming, but then going back to the original, right back to the core, what we can prove, and let the rest of it flail. Consider it. but focus on the facts. Now, what I want to start with here is a couple of quick things that are going to get buried by all of this. And that point being, one, I want you to look at these articles that we're going to probably revisit next week or whenever this goes away or this tapers down. But then think about that point in and of itself. The bombing, let's just call it like the Netanyahu ploy, which is quite literally what people in Israel, like the media, his critics, as well as his allies, will tell you he just starts wars in order to politically benefit himself. Maybe it's because he's about to go to prison, which he's been indicted and about to go to prison for like a decade, or because he wants to distract from something that's unpopular, or because he wants momentum for a certain war that's not popular. This is his tactic that is so well documented. I mean, I'm jokingly calling it that, but that's the reality. So think about that from Trump's perspective. As much as you may not want to admit it, if you're on his side, whatever that means, he is very unpopular right now, both from his side and everybody else. He's been tail spinning support. He's losing in regard to, I mean, everywhere I can see, he's getting called out for things, the Epstein files, and you bomb Iran. Now, let's be clear. That's always been something they've wanted to do, or at least whatever's controlling U.S. policy and whatever that thing is, that's what they've been trying to accomplish as far as I can see my entire life. 3 seconds from a bomb, right? So consider that this all might be, even though they wanted this, an effort to sort of drown out what I argue is a very vulnerable government. They're in a very vulnerable position right now, or rather power structure that is using our government to control us. Now, this is a really interesting interview that I was really like, I went into this with the expectation that she's an expert on this, and I wanted to get her insight on where we're at with this, what Trump's doing, and how this may affect other, how it synergistically works with other things. And I mean, she is such an expert on this, and it really does blow me away. Like, what my point in saying that is, in this interview, I was going, wow, like the depth of knowledge that she's getting into, and the things that she just connects it to. And I don't even want to try to explain it right now. It's stuff that I'm barely able to, but trust me, you're going to want to watch this, because she talks about glyphosate and the connection to things that go deeper than just, oh, it's hurting you because of a byproduct, potentially by design. And very worth that consideration. And I'll tell you right now that she seems to think that either Trump or RFK Jr. are, working through a difficult situation, or are doing this for the long-term positive. I told her I disagreed with that, but we see the problem and we both agree on that. And that the right path is not to do what the administration is currently doing. Now, I also want to include this one that Derek put out today. Really, really well done. And it's unfortunate this is going to get buried by what's going on. Biotech and pesticide corporations are, quote, winning under Trump's second administration. And it is scathing. Most of you probably already know this, but the reality of how, for example, the Bayer, the Right to Know article we just went over, showing you the Bayer administration, or rather, pretty much the Bayer company being just taking control of this administration, it would seem, in a lot of ways, like Obama Citibank. But then the larger point that he goes through on this is how it seems not just Trump, as you know, but a larger all of government kind of thing, and that this is a bigger problem than you may realize, if you're not watching the show, that is. So all that aside, pretty much one topic today, guys, and a lot of different parts around all of it. Now, I started with this clip. I just think it's insane to think about this with Charlie Kirk, right? It may seem like I don't think this should be regarded as a small point, because I will, of course, include our discussion about this, that, was Israel involved in Charlie Kirk's death? Let's look at the facts. And this was September 2025. Now, this doesn't include anything that came up after that, which was a ton. Candace Owens and Turning Point USA admitting the incredible story of how many things were involved with his mysterious death, the timing afterward and the lack of investigation. Finding out that the FBI basically held it up by 24 hours. It's just over the top, guys. My point is the evidence at this moment, before all the rest of it. And a lot of it was due to Candace and showing you the inside text communications, like that Turning Point did acknowledge were real, where he was telling you exactly what we're seeing today, that Iran was a problem and Zionism was driving us there and Trump was being played. And now he's dead. And there was a lot that I disagreed with him on. And in fact, I felt he was very partisan. But I actually have come to the conclusion, based on all of this, that he was trapped, whether, played the game like a lot of them do, but he did care about a lot of this stuff. And at the end of the day, the Zionism point, I think, opened his eyes to what we are saying. And he realized alarmingly that the Zionism part was not the same as Judaism or Israel, and recognized that that was a very alarming influence on Trump. and tried to stop that, if you remember. And he tried to tell him, and Trump got angry. His Zionist influencers and funders threatened him publicly and personally. Candace showed all of this. And he was very nervous about all of this, very uncomfortable, and was influencing his audience, which was literally the battleground audience for Israel influence in this country, which is, by the way, pretty much the most important country in the global influence for Israel. And they were on a knife's edge at one of the most vulnerable parts in their entire existence. And he was starting to go, I think they're lying to you. As you can show 100 clips like that, like the one I played, where he's telling you, we're not going to listen to you this time. And then he got killed. You can decide for yourself how that went down. The timing of that is very interesting and very relevant. But thinking about what he's saying and the interest of that right now, like Bondi using him to say, we're going to censor you because hate speech, and just knowing they're using him. And think about what he was saying, as this is just him saying, again, they're pushing us to go to war with Iran. That's Israel. We all know this, guys. Israel has been doing this for years. And remember, they're the ones telling you this is not regime change. We're just trying to help Iranians. But now we want regime change, right? They're laughing at you because they'll literally tell you they want to change the power, but then tell you it's not about regime change. Remember how many times we told you regime change is coming and they go, you guys are conspiracy theorists. Here we are. Now, this should not be one of those I told you so kind of situations. But you have to understand that there's a point of demonstrating our value for anybody that was correctly seeing this. But let's be clear on top of that. This has been one of the most obvious things in the entire conversation for 10 years. It has not even been remotely secret, but yet weirdly, the corporate conversation acted like it wasn't the reality, and mainstream played their role too, alternative. But my point is that for those coming out going, I told you, we knew it was going to happen, so did literally everybody. So make sure you understand that. But it's not about knowing that this was coming, because let's be honest, they were telling you it was coming. They were signaling they were going to do this. Iran better do something or we're going to bomb Iran. So it wasn't very insightful to see that this was coming, but it was insightful to understand the reason that it was happening and why it's being driven and how they're manipulating that to get here. Because they've threatened this many times over the years. Why it's now different. I think it's because Trump's in position, and I think it's because Israel has more influence over this certain circumstance than they ever have in history. And that's Trump, but it's not just Trump. It's about the circumstance of our government. So Charlie Kirk, very relevant in all of this. And as Max Blumenthal points out, this is what Charlie Kirk said in 2025. Keep the pressure up. Regime change in Iran would be a catastrophe. Where he cites Nikki Haley, who is screaming about regime change in Iran. And Max says, I think it's safe to say Trump and Israel are relieved that Charlie Kirk is not able to speak up today for their catastrophic regime change war. Zia chimes in and says the majority of Americans, and it's her opinion, I agree, or the person's opinion, the majority of Americans are with Charlie Kirk's position in this point. We don't want more wars. And that's been the case, whatever war, for as far as I've been doing this. They've never been popular, but yet that happens every time. And every time you get the same screaming Alex Jones, Benny Johnson types that justify whatever it is that needs to happen. Peace is what the world demands. I agree. He says, I believe this war will not end how they have planned. None of the wars so far have ended well for the U.S. None. Yeah, but that's a sign of a dying empire. So let's also point out a few things before we get into the meat of this. One, one of the main point in this all is the fact that Israel will do it at once, regardless, no matter what. That's kind of the idea here, because I'm not going to say Trump in any way is innocent in any of this. The U.S. government is complicit. But Trump, whether he was consciously letting this happen or just was along for the ride, is a very valid thing to consider. Now, let's not forget, when he was into this position, this recent administration, Miriam Adelson literally gave him the money needed to gain this position in order to get West Bank annexation. It was very public and very clear. This is from Haaretz, the leading Israeli newspaper. Trump is desperate for Miriam Adelson's cash, her condition, West Bank annexation. Right. And he's even jokingly said that in their discussions, and then people brush it off, right? Well, Trump came out just to make sure we all knew on the 10th and said, well, I oppose the annexation. That, by the way, was literally undergoing, as he said that, and had been going on his entire administration. And the last 10 years before that, and the years before that. None of them care. They're all ridiculous. They loved Trump, at the very least. I mean, what's funny to me is that Pompeo, the last administration, was the one that was like, well, it's not inconsistent. Yes, it was, though. It was entirely illegal, and it's been that way the entire time. Then it went back. Now Trump is saying he opposes it again, even though he allowed them to do it. This is cowardice, if you want to be honest about it. You can either own the position because it's difficult, or you can just lie and blame everybody else and always deflect and always hide and always blame your underlings. That's not what leaders do. But the point is, that's not what's happening anyway. So I want to make it very clear that Donald Trump can come out and say that as if it matters, that I don't want them to do that, and Israel doesn't care because they will do what they want regardless. In fact, I argue Trump is saying that just to hope he wins some minor points with his own team, knowing he won't call it out anyway. Here, Haaretz from the 23rd. And this is directly from, what's his name? Amachai, how do you say it? Eliyahu? And he's a minister in the government, reoccupying what is already ours, and post a picture of them. You've seen him before. You've talked about him. And he's pretty prominent, posting an Israeli flag in the West Bank. So this is what they do. And they're just demonstrating. Netanyahu said it. Smotrich said it. Ben-Gvir said it. We're taking back Netanyahu. We're taking back Gaza. We're taking back the West Bank, which, by the way, they're already right now reinstituting that in Gaza. Right now. Because why not, right? Because everyone's distracted. Let's just make Gaza even worse for them. That's literally what they're doing right now. Well, we saw the board of peace, right? Where Trump initiates his peace board, which is supposed to be essentially the new global order. That's what this is. That's even what, crazy enough, it's being criticized for from the other side of the order. So what we're always showing you is the elitist versus the bad elitist, or however you want to look at it. None of them are trying to free you from the globalist system, despite what Alex is flailing about over there. They want you in their globalist system. And it's just sad to watch them try to make sense of a globalist dynamic like the Board of Peace, or the Gaza Technocratic City, or every other, or his new WHO proposal. It's just how embarrassing that must be for them. But as Liam McCollum points out, at every turn, and not just this point, but all of them, by the way, every administration, Israeli officials have turned up their noses, in this case, at Trump's peace efforts. Openly, by the way. Asked to fund this? Nope, we don't want to fund any of it, even though they were the only one allowed to have a membership without paying for it. It says when the U.S. was negotiating with Iran, Israel bombed the negotiators. Last time. Remember that? And they did. As they claimed they were about to find peace, and they bombed under the cover of negotiations. Or like when they brought Soleimani under the guise of negotiations into the Iraq airport and killed him. That's what Trump did. Yep, that's very illegal, but he bad guy, so we're supposed to not care. I guess we're just that ridiculous, right? And it says when Trump struck a hostage deal with Hamas, Israel broke the ceasefire over 1,500 times. If we're still pretending like we don't know that, how embarrassing for you. When Trump created the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, Israel blocked the committee members from entering Gaza. Remember that story that they all tried to pretend wasn't happening? When Trump created the Board of Peace, they refused to pay. And yet they're still involved. Who is funding whom here? Right? Think about it. The money is being used by it. I mean, that's the reality, guys. This is going in one direction. So think about the reality of how these things happen, even in the face of Trump looking stupid, being embarrassed, and not getting what he wants. Israel does what it wants regardless. So think about that with Iran today. Now, you know what I think about polls. It's just one of many. But listen to your own Republican influencers over there. If that's for the side you're on, they'll tell you this is unpopular, guys. 7 out of 10 voters do not want the U.S. to take military action against Iran. It seems to be a hell of a lot more than that if you look at the real picture. This is from this year. Americans, left, right, and aware of the ridiculousness of all of it, do not want war with Iran, or any war for that matter. That's why he pretended to be the peace president and the Board of Peace, right? It's all just a show, guys. It is all theatrics. We all used to remember that when it was somebody else on the other side or the other team in power. But some people just can't seem to see past the person they want. Now, here are some other examples. Huckabee, from this shockingly religious Zionist administration that seemed to be putting the Zionist extremist religious interests over the U.S. interests. But hashtag America first, right? So as he asked in Tucker's interview how much Americans think, what they think matters, right? We live in a democracy, we're told. That we're the living embodiment of the constituents' will. I mean, they still, it's just so sad that anybody pretend. We can visually see that's not the reality in 100 different ways. Not to say that shouldn't be. That's a different conversation. It just simply is not. But they go, yes, of course you matter more than anything. But then when it comes to the point, we'll go, well, they don't want that, and you're doing it anyway. Okay. Well, other factors. Okay, well then you don't care what we think, or at the very least, it's less important than whatever you decide to think is your other factor. You know what this is. And of course, Tucker with this whole, gee golly, I don't get it kind of thing. And it works to some degree because he's making Huckabee look like he's ridiculous.
How much does it matter what Americans think?
Well, it matters
every bit what Americans think. That's why
Okay.
Americans vote. It's why Americans have the opportunity to have free speech. We want them to have that.
Okay, so what percentage of Americans support a war with Iran?
I don't know. Do you know?
I do. I think it's around, I saw the numbers yesterday, I think it was like 21%.
Okay.
Is that enough to have a war with Iran?
We don't live in a world where you have a poll taken to find out whether our policy should be a particular direction. Because
I thought...
No, wait a minute there, Huckabee. You could say poll, or you could say election. You know, in a material sense, the same thing, isn't it? So we don't live in a country where we ask the opinions of the constituents and they write them down and then we do that. What kind of world would that be? We live in a world where we have other things to consider and your opinions are not chief among them. I mean, there's really no way to misunderstand this. That's why this went viral. I just think they want you to know this to some degree right now. I mean, I hope this is not lost on anybody. There is no way around this. And the fact that it has to be squeaked out through Tucker's show is something that we should all be very well aware of, is a sign of the times, but nonetheless is still important.
And to find out whether our policy should be
Have a war with Iran?
We don't live in a world where you have a poll taken to find out whether our policy should be a particular direction. Because
I thought you just said that
that's
we
direct
vote.
democracy. No, we care deeply about it. But on the other hand, do we make the decisions of foreign policy and even domestic policy based on
We
what
care
the
deeply
latest
about
What the American people desire? Well, yeah, man, that's what you pretend is the reality. What am I missing here?
it. In
number
what
is?
sense? If we're ignoring it, then in what sense do we, quote, care deeply about it?
Well, I think we care deeply when we see there's a threat.
No, but about America.
Oh, okay. I mean, how do you even make sense of that statement? So I guess when there's a threat, only when there's a threat, or what do you mean? And who decides whether there's a threat? So it's on and off. Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't care. I mean, he trapped himself ridiculously in this, but what it shows you guys is that when you lie about everything, I say it all the time, he's trapping himself in his broken logic. The reality is, guys, they don't care what we think. And if pushed, that becomes very easy to see. What he's really doing here is what I always talk about in front of those State Department briefings or anything else. If you ask the right questions, it's insanely easy to make them look ridiculous because they just waffle and turn and dismiss, and it's easy. And that's why I'll often point out there's only a very few of them that actually do that.
Americans' opinions. So you've got 350.
Well, I think we care deeply when we see there's a threat.
No, but about Americans' opinions. So you've got 350 million Americans. They voted in this last election on the basis, in part, of the promise no more wars. Okay, so now we're about to have a war. Looks like 80% of people are against it. In that range, let's say 70%, but nowhere near majority support for this war. And it's not direct democracy, but it is a form of democracy. It's representative democracy.
The ultimate form of democracy in our system, in a republic, because we're not a true democracy, we're a republic.
Exactly, right? It's a mediated democracy.
It'll be an opportunity for Americans to vote if they think that we've made the wrong policy decisions.
Oh, okay. You get it, right? So what happens is they can do whatever they want for 4 years, but it doesn't matter. We'll pretend that we're kind of considering your opinion. And then, yeah, go ahead and write the things down that you like. And then we'll consider those things. And then we'll spend 4 years doing what we want. And are you confused? I mean, that's what we all live through, right? In what world do we think that what we all collectively think we write down or what we all say out loud in any way translates into the ideas of these people? The reality is you have, upper level groups of people who with lots of money and concentrated influence that they ultimately get to decide what at least gets in their minds. Then we still don't have any real insight into whether they decide. It's lobbying money and influence and power that ultimately guides their choices. But you think Joe at the corner shop and that they're what I want, and they go, oh, okay. I mean, we can't be this naive about the world we live in, guys. This is why we have monsters like this who do whatever they want, allow children to be murdered and starved and raped and trafficked, and they just look the other way. That's who we're dealing with. And it's not just Huckabee, in case you're missing the point.
I personally think the president is making the right policy decision.
But I guess, but you just said it matters deeply what Americans think. And if the overwhelming majority are against it, in what sense does it matter? Because what I hear is it matters what they think, but it really doesn't matter what they think because...
No, you take it in, you certainly ingest that.
And then what do you do with it once you ingest it?
Then you make sure that you have... No,
you just gotta... It goes out the other end, obviously.
No.
Man. I mean, it truly doesn't even need commentary, guys. It's just wildly obvious. And there was plenty of others in there. As I said, the same point I made last time about that discussion was obviously this was a powerful interview. There's lots of good stuff in there. And I've plenty of times pointed out Tucker's work that I thought was valid and relevant, but still consider that most every single thing that you heard in this interview, you would have heard in our show over the last 10 years. I'm going to go ahead and say literally everything we talked about, maybe save for small insights that I wouldn't have been aware of. The point, though, is that same with anybody else covering this over the years. Now, it doesn't make it any less relevant, and it's got reach. Great. That's why I shared it. But still remember that. And think about what that means in moments where they might need to control the way things come out when they have to, even though they didn't want them to in the first place. They just being power structures, right? Now, I'll play this again just because we've played it. It's important on this part of the conversation. All of you guys have probably seen this on the show many times, but it's important to think about this, that this is not only with what we just saw, the reality that Israel does what it wants regardless, that the influence there is quite self-evident, but then on top of that, that the U.S. over the years, because of, and actually we should just show this one first, because of the many different examples and over the years, I'll play this one at the end because I think that's a good ending clip, but Netanyahu repeatedly, there's many compilations of him pushing one more week, 3 more days, another year, and just Iran, or in the other compilations, also pushing him to Iraq and also pushing him to all the other countries, right? It's pretty obvious, at the very least, that he had a hand in influencing the idea. And then the point is that you can see that the U.S. government was literally gaming out, how the hell do we get to war with Iran? Exactly how Patrick Clausen here frames it. You guys have seen this, but if you haven't, this might open your eyes a little bit. The U.S. government has long wondered how they could, quote, get to war with Iran, as Patrick openly discusses in this Washington Institute meeting from 2012. This has never been about what's good for the American people or the Iranian people for that matter. I should have wrote that too, but what's good for Israel at your expense.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall we had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. But I would just like to suggest that one can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition. Of, it's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
I don't really know how you ignore how obvious that is. Whatever the side or whatever your perspective, that clearly the U.S. government has been, even if you think it is for the right thing to do or the best outcome for everybody, that they're doing it manipulatively to get there. That shouldn't shock anybody. That's their MO, guys. That is what they do. But just to think about how long that's been happening, and then maybe take a step even further back and go, okay, are they actually telling the truth about Iran? Are they trying to manipulate us into this war, but for a good reason? That's usually not the reality. And it's just hilarious to watch people, like what I've already said so far. Like, what have we discussed thus far in the show that is not rooted entirely in fact? It's funny to watch people grapple with this that are so lost in the partisan divide that they don't realize that they're, people like us and what we're doing. And what I often say on when I'm discussing things online, it's like, okay, we'll keep fighting for your rights, even as you fight us. One day, maybe you'll realize that we're fighting for you right now, but it's unfortunate. But half the time you wonder whether it's about other petty dynamics. And I think that's what drives a lot of these politicians, guys. I think that's what's devolved into for obvious outside reasons. But I'll include this article from Matt Ehret for the Last American Vagabond. The Greater Israel Scheme and its global power play. Global, a delusional recipe for Armageddon. It's not a secret. They have patches with it on. They give discussions with it on their podiums. It's not, but yet we act like it's a fake story because mainstream alternative media says so. This is what we're talking about. This is the globalist part of this is their part of the globalist agenda. Very, very, very clear, guys. I'll include that for you to read. It's worth your time. Now, also, just one last point on this, opening stuff that might well be relevant. Here's what Khomeini Media, which it doesn't have the gray check, which wouldn't surprise me, but it does state that it's the official account of their media website, English website side. Regardless, it's just worth including because it's interesting to think about how this might connect. Because the reality is Iran in many ways has been, because that's obviously a good point to make is look at what they're drowning in the Epstein files, right? But it says the tip of the iceberg of Western civilization, the Epstein files. And this is the 26th. Just think about what else might have been driving something that we're dealing with. Now, I put this out on the 27th. Again, this is not some major insightful point, guys. Everybody saw this coming. But I just wanted to make this point before it actually came to pass. I said, if the Trump administration takes the United States to war with Iran, or even bombs the country again, because of where we currently are, it will be demonstrating, in my opinion, to the world once and for all, because this is clearly not the first time, that the U.S. government, all sides of it, the U.S. government is under the control of Israel. I have never seen a more universally unpopular war in my life. Now, as I've said before, the people in my inner circle that are good people, and I just mean that like in family or local, neighbor or whatever, that they're good people. And I know they're good people. They have good intentions, a good heart, in my opinion, who aren't part of some agenda, who aren't part of some secret partisan social media game, whatever. But yet still fall for a lot of this stuff, who still support certain things, who still believe Trump's doing the right, whatever. And so I always use that as a point because I think it's important to think about that it's not all manipulation. There are people that just actually fall for these things who don't, whatever reason. And so even those people, at least in my view right now, are saying they're done. They're done. They're disappointed. They're upset. They're tired because it's clear. Even the ones holding on to this point, after Stargate, after everything we've seen, turning back on Maha, spending more, growing the government, every single double cross, and now even the Epstein files. But now they're saying, okay, this is the bomb. It was on the bombing of Iran, the way it happened. It's no way you could pretend that makes sense. Think about that, guys. I've been saying it for months now, even before that, just because I feel like I can see it. It's been my opinion, but I think you can verify this at this point. The majority of Americans are not on the side of the partisanship right now. That's what I think. Now, Daniel McAdams points to this from the 20th. A Trump advisor has confirmed to Axios the Pentagon has prepared multiple strikes. Now, what do they say then? Fake news. That's not true. It turns out that it was true, at least that they had the conversation, which then shows you that on the 20th, and it seems even before that, as we get to an article in a minute, that they had already planned this. And what does that mean, Ryan? Well, that means that they were pretending to have negotiations while they were preparing to bomb them. Just like last time. I would argue that they never intended to have negotiations, at least not whoever was actually controlling the outcome. And I think that was Israel. So remember, my point was this was called fake news at the time. But now after it's happened, we know that they were planning this. And now even Israel's claimed that it was planned a week before. But on top of that they had plans to focus on taking out the leadership. And they said fake news. Well, they're claiming right now that they did. Israel's claiming they tried to take out everybody. As usual, trying to make work the narrative for themselves, while the U.S. has probably said, don't say that. They do anyway, and then don't care because they just get what they want all the time. And so in this case, I think it's important to think about all those points and then what later ended up happening. And as Daniel says, this is criminal behavior. He said this on the 20th. Assassinating foreign leaders will come back to haunt the United States and every American as well. They unleash the whirlwind. It's also against the law, by the way. There's no legal justification. Like, even if you claim he's a terrorist, from our judicial system, from the international law, they're supposed to be arrested. They're supposed to be charged. Evidence is supposed to be presented. So too was it to happen with Osama bin Laden, guys. Just because we act like they didn't need to because bad guy, because we were that naive at the time, does not change the reality. It doesn't change it with Trump and bombing Iran. It just is the real. They're breaking the law. Every moment that we let those things go away without any kind of acknowledgement, whether there's accountability or not, gives them one more step in that direction. Just unilateral authoritarianism. They do whatever they want. They write whatever they want. Shut up. You're not in charge. That's the world we live in. That's their CEO-run country that they want to create for you. Now, important to understand that they had been very, very, very clear about not wanting a nuclear weapon. Now, remember, this is important to the larger conversation because I'm not saying that the U.S. government believed them, but here's the difference. So this is the foreign minister involved in negotiations. He says, pillared on the understandings forged in the previous round about the ongoing, feigning peace negotiations from U.S. and Israel. And Iran was involving, and they said they will resume talks with the U.S. in Geneva with a determination to achieve a fair and equitable deal in the shortest possible time. So on February 24th, he says, our fundamental convictions, and by the way, this has been reconfirmed by the foreign minister of Oman, from any number of people involved in this process. He says, our convictions are crystal clear. Iran will under no circumstances ever develop a nuclear weapon. Neither will the Iranians ever forego our right to harness the dividends of peaceful nuclear technology for our people. Now, what's interesting is it's being reported by the Oman foreign minister, just make sure I got the title right, that they also had then post this discussion, post the 24th, had then agreed to say we will forego all enrichment, which is insane for 1,000 reasons, not even getting into my opinion about whether any of it should be happening, but in the sense of what countries are allowed to do. And what that then affords them and what the power they can generate from a nuclear civilian program. But they were claiming they were good to get rid of all of it. I think that's what triggered the attack because they were finally willing to go, you know what? We'll give you every single thing you want. I think they pretty much called their bluff because Israel didn't want any deal. That's why they've always sabotaged these deals. They want the illusion of peace so they can blame the other side. So now that we know this, and it really, look, to be clear, that they expressed that. And guys, they've been expressing that as long as I've been doing this. But you could say they're lying, right? Of course, they could be lying. But you see, here's the point. Trump didn't say we don't believe them. He said they refuse to say we will never have a nuclear weapon. That's a flatly false. That's lies, guys. They know that's a lie. Trump knows that's a lie, unless he's somehow being kept out of the loop in his own conversation. So when they post that, that means they're already setting the tone. Here's the actual post. Iran refuses to say we will never have a nuclear weapon. Just in case it's not clear, he's literally saying Iran will never have a nuclear weapon right there on the 24th. Then on the 25th, they post this. They refuse to say it. Okay, you get the point? So the reality is they're pretending they're not saying it, even though they're saying it and not going, well, we just don't believe you. That's a very different conversation. So on top of that, that was it. So I just said, not only were the Iranians very clear about not developing a nuke, despite Trump claiming the opposite, they were in fact in the process, that's the next point we're going to get into, of formalizing that very agreement. Again, which by the way, was the JCPOA that Trump violated, that they never broke. That was just the same thing again, by the way, actually with more restrictions. But when Israel attacked using the U.S. military, and I think to stop this very deal. Of course, Secretary of War speaks up and says, the Iranian regime had their chance, yet they refused to make a deal. Are you kidding me? Like, Hegseth probably doesn't even know what he's talking about. He's just repeating what Israel or somebody told him. But regardless, that's not true. And now they're suffering the consequences. Oh, wait, so the consequences of not accepting the deal you offer is killing children, bombing their country? In what world does an agreement mean you do what I say or we're going to bomb you? That's not a negotiation. That's strong-arming threats. But you see, this is what Trump does. If you don't do this, we're going to do everything we've ever done ever in history, and then go, why won't you make a deal? Well, you just threatened to murder everybody, man. Maybe nuclear. I don't know what you meant by that. That's insane. Do you think Trump would just cow down and say, yes, fine, let's make a deal? If Iran says we'll kill you if you don't make a deal? I mean, I don't feel like we ever even need to verbalize these points because what we're dealing with is a bunch of people who are not stupid and then a bunch of dishonest people at the highest level of the conversation who just gaslight everybody for their own agenda. The point is they did make a deal before and they tried to make another one here and you guys screwed them over. That's the provable reality here because it's all coming out. We're going to get to that right here with him speaking publicly with local media, or rather Western media, about how that's what happened. and then how he was very disappointed about how they chose to double cross Iran in this conversation. But yet they're from a different country and they're brown. So I guess their opinion doesn't matter to the Western Trump supporting audiences. I don't know. Okay, before we get to that and the bombing of the school and the many other weird variables to this entire conversation, this is weird as hell to me. And I don't even know where to place this right now. Now, I was going to play most of this and maybe we will, but now because of this new element, I'm not even sure if I want to play all of this. Now, here's the thoughts on my mind, just in case you missed the opening. There's reports right now. Where was it? Right here. Right here. Hold on. Sorry. There we go. Of this video being AI. Now, I'm just going to throw this out now before we get to it so you know why I don't want to, make sure it's clear that this one is being reported by this person, a security consultant. So take it for what it is, claiming, and, somewhat, this has been going on around this person before. Then Grok even says, yes, it's an AI-generated video, a deep fake. And on top of that, there's a lot of other. Now, I'm not saying from my perspective, Grok is a coin flip. I've seen Elon lie through this. I've seen it lie to me until I basically force it to tell me the truth, like many times. Nonetheless, it still has a value in regard to the partisan conversation. I've said this many times, and that is that people who are partisan might choose to, consider these points when otherwise not from the other side or whatever. But think about this. What would that mean? So let's watch some of this. Now, and her point was that there's no visible breathing patterns or whatever. You could decide. Maybe that's all to distract. Maybe this is my whole point of missing the forest for the trees. If we're all fixated on whether or not this was we're missing the fact that they literally unequivocally just broke the law and they should be charged for that right now. You see my point? But so what's weird about this is that, as we were discussing before, is it's possible that this is just something that they do. Has nothing to do with whether it's some trick or a ploy, but he's like, I'm tired, just do, because we know, and I've been saying this for years, guys, we're way past this line. They have the tech to do this, and we wouldn't even know any better, which apparently seems to be the case. And maybe that's just because he didn't feel like doing it. Maybe because they had it all ready and they wanted this video to be out and exact and ready the moment that it happened in the middle of the night, which is for the US side of the West. It was like midnight 1, something like that, as I understand it. So maybe it means nothing. Maybe it's just because they do that these days, which should be considered with his old auto pen, Biden. Maybe he's too old. I mean, who knows, right? On top of that, though, or secondarily, we should wonder whether this is something that means more. If this is genuinely a fake video, does that mean there's more to this that's fake? Well, there's been a whole lot of that floating around, which again is, I don't even find that to be an insightful point. They fake stuff all the time. And, the wondering whether or not this all might be fake is not some huge, I've been seeing people float that as an idea, like it's some next gen, like their 5D chess layer. I'm like, guys, whether they've lied to us is the most 101 conspiracy theory mindset. Either way, it's still interesting to consider that if they fake this, what is it that mean the entire thing is like a wag the dog? Does it mean that Trump is not around and they're lying about him being involved in this? Did Trump get killed? And, what is going on? These are all just things that you wonder, because why would they fake this? Now, I want to be clear, though. I don't think it's in our interest to just go down that rabbit hole without evidence. Right now, I haven't even truly verified, other than those things, that this is in fact an AI video. So all that being said, let's look at some of this and consider what this means. I just thought that was so fascinating because it is something. The third thing, this is the third thing I'm glad I remembered this. Like I said with the image conversation. And I want to really stress that I don't think we should assume this is even the case. It could be some secondary manipulation to get us all distracted, right? That it's possible on top of all of it that it's some sort of AI altered part of the video. Because these people are pretty vain. They're pretty narcissistic. And I said this about the image stuff where you can go on your phone, right? And you can let me get rid of that glare, right? And you can brush out the glare in the sun or whatever. And if you run it through an AI thing, it'll say the image has been altered. It will tell you that. And then people use that to assume that it's all fake when in reality, it's just simply altered. But it is a real real image. That's a good important question to ask. If you ask, is this AI or is this altered? Ask later, though, is the image actually there somewhere in the world, or does it actually exist besides that? Then maybe they'll give you the answer. But the point is that this could be them sort of brushing up Trump's face because it was late at night. And that would, worth considering that. It could mean nothing. Anyway, so let's watch this. And I just simply said, now that they have bombed Iran, for the remainder of the Americans that were debating this, Trump's policy just became very clearly Israel first. because nobody wants this, and this is not beneficial to the U.S. at all.
Short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
You know, one quick point to point out, actually, I've never seen, and maybe I'm just not thinking too much on this, he's got shadows across his arms. In what world would they do that? You telling me that they always film in these locations. You're going to tell me they've got things in front of the lights that put shadows on his coat? Doesn't that seem strange? Maybe I'm overthinking it. I don't know. That just seems like that's like a faux pas, like whoever put this together, or maybe they're just incompetent, like I'm always pointing out. Anyway, I'll let it play out a little bit, just some of it anyway.
Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people.
Very, very objective, right? Like just bad people that we don't want in the position. You know, okay, you don't get to decide who are good and bad in regard to, you know, the just removing somebody from position. But I'll try to forego my comments just because it's always the same stuff. But he's just going to go the evil, terrorist, boogeymen, bad guys. And what they ultimately did was kill a lot of innocent people.
Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas.
How? Name one example. Literally a single example, and I will admit I'm wrong. One example. Show me one example where they're threatening anybody other than you stepping up on their doorstep and saying, "Don't do this or we'll respond." And then all of a sudden, their reaction to you is what's causing risk. I genuinely would love somebody to tell me what they think. Where is an example of Iran threatening anybody anywhere? Not some abstract, well, they fund them, therefore, and we know they're doing this. Let's just even say, like I said before, let's just say they fund literally everybody. Why would they then still be responsible for everybody's actions? Unless you're proving that they are guiding their actions. The U.S. funds people all over the world. If they're therefore then responsible for everyone they fund, well, the U.S. is guilty of genocide. Oops, that's actually the truth. Or they're guilty of any number of things. But you see how that works? The point, though, is you can actually step it back and realize that they're not doing what they're claiming. They're allies with these groups. I don't think you can give an example. I'd love someone to challenge me on that. Where are they doing this anywhere in the world that is, you know, destabilizing entire countries and then reaping the benefits, or removing people from power and then splitting it up and balkanizing it? You know, that's what the U.S. has been doing our entire lives, all over the world.
And our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged.
They've said death to the American government. Yes, that's true, and easily proven. Very, 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 very clear. And they'll say that themselves. But of course, when the U.S. government translates that for you into English, of course, they just don't include that part.
An unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries.
Yeah. Where's that again? Oh, example? None? Zero? What country? Oh, yeah. Okay, keep going.
Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days.
I mean, we're just going back to the classics here. I mean, you have to understand the reality of all the things that have driven to this. I mean, the illegal overthrow of their country, the destabilization of their entire country during that time for anybody other than the elitist at the top, and then the absolute never-ending chaos that they're trying to cause since they took the country back in 79. And just caused chaos, destruction of their money. I mean, and this is all proven. They admit this. They tell you that they did that. Vicente and everybody else has bragged about doing that. You're destroying their country. And so if you want to talk about the embassy or any other points, you've been intelligence-wise infiltrating, attacking, causing chaos. Like Patrick Clausen told you, we could get a little bit nastier about that. That's what they're doing. And so then you got these situations that they ultimately create. Now, look, I've never said Iran is not capable of terrible things. They're a government. Hold them accountable like you would any government. All of them are capable of hurting their own people and killing foreign power. If they commit a crime, charge them with a crime. But the idea that when you are constantly trying to take over their country, that they take action against you as a crime is insane to me. Over and over and over. I mean, it's like Libya and Gaddafi or any other point you could make. It never stops. And again, I actually don't even think I need to make these points. I think it's so spectacularly clear to most Americans that Iran is not even remotely close to what Israel's doing, and yet here we are. That alone is a part that even average people can't ignore.
In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel.
I mean, you know what's embarrassing about all these things, despite the actual breadth of the story that they choose not to include, is the fact that they're going through the examples they can give you and leaving out the 75,000 examples in between that where they're doing all the same things, or where they're lying and creating them, or false flagging, or regime changing, all throughout that. You know, again, like I said in 79, or every other year since then, or the 6 times they've tried to overthrow the country since I've been doing this. And people die every single time. You know what I mean? Like, it just becomes, and that's all on top of the fact that whether this is even him, it causes a whole nother level to it.
In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole.
Oh, they knew, and they're probably. Great, good information. Let's talk about the USS Liberty, or the many different examples. I mean, the Cole is actually an important conversation that you haven't looked into, that we've talked about before. The reality, though, is that every single one of these examples has a deeper point to the story.
Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies
that was a cut right there.
Killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime.
Yeah, that's a cut, which would suggest not AI. If I'm going to, the opinion, but maybe that's on purpose. But again, now we're talking about Iraq. You mean the illegal invasion of Iraq that everyone in the world knows was an illegal justification based on the lies of weapons of mass destruction? And so they defend your invasion. It's the same point for every one of the examples, guys. And now they're terrorists? We just can't be this ridiculous. I don't believe most people are.
Regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years.
No, what he's actually referring to, and it's the only example I can even think of, is the PMU in Iraq, which is a group that has been responding to their illegal occupation of Iraq, and that they continue to bomb in response to anything Iran does. And it's just this insane, ridiculous, it's not even a circle. It doesn't even make sense. But yes, at one point, there was actually support from Iran in regard to being an ally, but that has long since changed because of the groups changing over, 10 years. But that's all they've got, guys. From there forward, it's all a bunch of Houthis and Hamas and all the lies they spin.
Well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels and international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror.
Yes, that been mass terror? I don't know, maybe the ongoing 2-year genocide, the raping and torturing, the bombarding of other countries, the destabilization of Libya and Syria and Iraq. And I mean, that's not pure terror. The fact that they were muscling ships in the Strait of Hormuz, right? I mean, did they bomb them? No, they didn't do that. They just, they had a little kerfuffle. Terrorism. I mean, think about what we're talking about here. I mean, like I said, I'm just tired of even trying to pretend like anybody thinks this is real. And again, I was going to play it all the way through, but because of that anomaly, he speaks in absolutes. Calls on the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow their government. I mean, can you even imagine if this was Iran saying this about this country, which I've never heard them do? But it's okay because he's a good guy, though, so it's okay, right? They can literally rape and murder and torture, but they just got to yell freedom, and it's okay because they yelled the right word, and so they're the good guy, right? Here is what the foreign minister of Oman had to say. Within hours of Oman's foreign minister saying on the 27th to 28th, that, quote, Iran agreed to zero enrichment uranium stockpiling. Israel immediately bombs Iran. The U.S. promptly joins. So you could argue that Israel just took action and the U.S. followed suit because they either felt like they had, like they had to, or that they felt like if they didn't, that would make them look weak. Think about how gross that is, that's their guiding logic, if that's the case. And you can prove that is how they think in other cases. I think there's actually an example of this today where they would, or willing to go to war and kill people just so they don't get embarrassed. I mean, you can look at the prolonging of Afghanistan, right? Or Vietnam. They just kick the can down the road. People die year after year after year because they don't want to be the one to look weak. That's who we're actually dealing with here. So we'll go over this article next. Here is what the foreign minister of Oman had to say.
What has Iran agreed to you that they have never done before? Can you give us any sense?
The single most important achievement, I believe, is the agreement that Iran will never, ever have a nuclear material that will create a bomb. This is, I think, a big achievement. This is something that is not in the old deal that was negotiated during President Obama's time.
The JCPOA, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, otherwise known as the Iran deal. Now, what he said, I'd like to believe is very clear, right? I'm just going to, for a moment, laugh at the ridiculous people on Face the Nation here, where he said very clearly that they will forego, like, it just will not have it. They're agreeing for the first time, different than any other deal, that they won't have it. Now listen to the way she responds.
This is something completely new. It really makes the enrichment argument less relevant, because now we are talking about zero stockpiling.
Zero.
And that is very, very important, because if you cannot stockpile material that is enriched, then there is no way you can actually create a bomb, whether you enrich or don't enrich.
So essentially, in an action, like in a real sense, what they're foregoing is the potential for the nuclear civilian side of it. That's always been the point, is that, well, they're not seeking a bomb, but they'll enrich uranium for the nuclear civilian programs that everyone else in the world uses. But now they're even willing to go, you know what, fine, we won't do that, if this is accurate. And it does appear to be based on all the factors.
And I think this is really something that has been missed a lot by the media, and I want to clarify that from the standpoint of a mediator.
So explain that. So the enriched material, the things that could be used as nuclear fuel for a bomb, you're saying Iran would not keep on their own soil?
You've got to be, what? So none, zero. They won't, there's no enrichment. They won't have it. So they're selling it? She's just so tunnel vision. Iran bomb, bad guys. So wait, who's got the bomb now? Iran's bombing where? Like, what? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Even just that first question, but she keeps doing it. Watch.
Not keep on their own soil for a bomb. You're saying Iran would not keep on their own soil?
They would give it up.
They would give it up. They wouldn't have it. Okay?
Give it up?
They will not be able to actually accumulate that material that will enable them to create a bomb. There's no accumulation. So there will be zero accumulation. Zero stockpiling.
Oh, zero. Got it.
And full verification. That is also equally important achievement, I think. A full and comprehensive verification by the IAEA, which is the agency in charge of this file.
The UN nuclear watchdog.
That's
so
right.
You're saying all enriched material would be shipped someplace else, not.
Am I speaking Chinese right now? What are you talking about? So where's Iran bomb gonna? Where are they gonna bomb? Where's the bomb gonna go? I mean, I honestly feel like she's trying to be difficult in order to be like, to just muddy the waters, that we can't allow the American population to hear that they don't want a bomb and that they're willing to forego what every other, like, just, we don't have the material. It's not we're making it and selling it. We're not making it and then shipping it somewhere. We're not doing that process. I'm just sorry. I was like falling out of my chair that she even asked the third time she asked right there.
Not Russia, but.
No. The current stockpiles that still exist.
The things that are still in Iran.
I think that there
So what you're saying is you're making bombs. No.
There's agreement now that this will be downblended to the lowest level possible.
Okay.
To a neutral level, a natural level, which means.
He's saying, so what they already have on file, which is important. They're arguing they will, whatever the term is, downgrade that, down whatever he said, get rid of it. And while not making more is the important part.
And convert it into fuel, and that fuel will be irreversible.
In regard to the pile they already have, just to make sure that's clear. So that becomes the last element, if I'm understanding correctly, based on the agreement that might be taking place, or now is not, but could have, is that they would then use that out for the nuclear energy side of it, but then no longer stockpile anymore.
Would be significant if Iran agreed to that.
It is very significant.
And Iran did agree to it. It's the point he made to start.
And I think we have agreement on that.
Yep.
In my view.
In your view.
Yes.
Because.
I'm sorry. Look, this is such a perfect textbook example of how the left or right, this absurdly stupid media has a one-note idea and they just hone in on that one point. Oh, in your view. Oh, so implying that it might not be the case. Got it. No, Iran said they agree. He was inside in the negotiations, and they wrote it down. They agree. Now, that's not to say they're going to do it. That's a different point. But she's muddying the idea that it even came to pass, that he might even be wrong about that. I just think that's so ridiculous.
Today, CBS confirmed a confidential report from the IAEA says inspectors report seeing Iran conducting regular activity at bombed uranium enrichment sites. But Iran has refused to tell us what has happened to their stockpile. They have refused to.
Yeah, didn't Trump say it was obliterated? Are we pretending, are we now admitting we know that wasn't the reality?
Allow UN inspectors in to look at it.
Now, that's actually wildly inaccurate. They've been letting them in for decades. That was the original agreement. And even after that, the IAEA has been there. They're the ones that said, I think it was 2025, that they're not seeking a nuclear weapon. Remember, Gabbard said the same thing recently. So the idea that they're not letting them in is ridiculous. First of all, what we're talking about is after they've been bombed and in the midst of tensions with a foreign power. And the UN is classically manipulated by Israel and the United States. So it's very different than saying there's not letting them look. Like, she's doing a really really clumsy job of trying to manufacture the benign facts into something that makes you feel like there's something suspicious going on. And that's not to say that there's not. Maybe there is behind it. But she's just taking I'm not making a bomb and contouring it into bombs might be possible. That's what she's trying to do, and it's lazy.
Are you telling me that inspectors would be given access to these sites, like at Isfahan?
Like always, and every time before this.
An agreed deal, there will be full access.
Iran has offered that.
Yes.
I want to be clear again. This is something that's been going on regularly. If she doesn't know that, that's embarrassing. I think she does, and she's just trying to impress on that would be wild if that happened, even though it's happened 1,000 times. I think you get the point. She knows very well what she's doing, I think, or at least who is pulling her strings.
So who would these...
even look at his laugh. I feel like that was very clear.
To these sites, like at Isfahan?
If there is a deal, an agreed deal, there will be full access.
Iran has offered that?
Yes.
So who would these inspectors be? It would be UN? IAEA?
IAEA. But I think, there is room also, if there is a deal in place. I am quite confident, from my point of view, that even United States inspectors will have access at some point in the process.
Which, now that would be wild. In the earlier days, that was something that was happening to some degree, even with Israel. But they got caught trying to sneak in nuclear material. See, it's something we don't even include. There's so many points we can include. That's an incredibly obvious point. They get caught. They literally caught an Israeli entity in the bathroom and they tested. The point is, they've tried to blame them many times by making that the case, which speaks to the point, doesn't it? But so that they might even allow it again would be incredible to me, knowing that they know they're trying to manipulate them. But we're not even there since it's not even happening. Don't forget the starting point. This was yesterday, or the day before into yesterday, and then after this became public, they bombed them, knowing that this was almost going to happen.
If we have a deal that is respected and fair and endurable, I see no reason why there is no access to be given even to the United States itself.
Iran has never allowed American weapons inspectors on their soil. They wouldn't let President Obama do that.
No, well, that's
you think Iran would let President Trump send American?
There's a big difference between having a U.S. politician. Unless I'm incorrect, and I'm pretty damn sure that there has been U.S. entities in regard to, if they've allowed an Israeli entity, which I've talked about in the past, point being that they have very clearly allowed international elements, which I argue included people from all sides of this that were involved in researching this. Either way, they've let people come through and investigate and test for a really long time. So why they would need Donald Trump to walk through, I don't understand. But
inspectors into Iran?
This is why I think this is a much, much better deal, because I think Iran is open to the idea.
Yeah, look it up for yourself, guys. We started the entire segment with her gaslighting you about what is and isn't happening. So consider that. Now, in regard to this post, peace within reach. Now, this is posted on the 28th. Now, appears to be, I think, based on the difference of time the time exchange, that this was posted right about the same time they were being bombed, because this is technically written as the 28th, but I'm based on the writing, and it doesn't appear that they're folding in that they had been bombed at this point. So this is folding over from that day, what he's simply talking about. We were close, and then they bombed them. So it says Iran agreed during indirect talks with the United States never to stockpile enriched uranium. That is huge. And said Oman's top diplomat, who described the development as a major breakthrough. He said that he also said on Friday that he believed all issues in a deal between Iran and the U.S. could be resolved amicably and cohesively. And then they bombed him instead. If the ultimate objective is to ensure forever that Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb, which is what they claim they're doing, even though that's pretty much where we already are. He says, I think we have cracked that problem through these negotiations by agreeing on a very important breakthrough that has never been achieved any time before, and still has not, because Israel bombed them anyway. The single most important achievement, he writes, I believe, is the agreement that Iran will never, ever have a nuclear material that will create a bomb. He says, quote, now we are talking about zero stockpiling. And that is a very, very important, very important, because if you cannot stockpile material that is enriched, then you can't have an actual bomb. They would also be full and comprehensive verification by the international community. Oman's top diplomat also said Iran would degrade its current stockpiles of nuclear material, as you saw, lowest level possible. This is something completely new. It really makes the enrichment argument less relevant because now we're talking about zero. Regarding recent U.S. demands regarding Iran's nuclear program, he said, I believe Iran is open to discuss everything. Continuing, it says the big picture is that a deal is in our hands. That was the sentiment from others involved as well, until they said bomb them anyway. We're not exactly happy with the way they're negotiating, Trump said, adding that Iran should make a deal. Okay, so this is what I want you to understand. At a time when it was clear, even based on what was being discussed, because others are involved, that there were at a deal point. Like we've told you in the past with Gaza, they kept getting close, and that's when Israel would screw it all up. It's admitted by their own people, their own government. I don't think it was Lapid Yair. I think it was Gallant, I believe, was the one that publicly said it. And there's many of them, but in their inner circle that came out and said point blank, he has been sabotaging the deals. Like every other time before this, by the way, if you're not blind. And so in this case, we know at this point they were close, that everyone agreed. They're even making concessions they've never made before. And Trump says, we don't like how they're negotiating. They should make a deal. You mean aside from the one they're making? So I think Trump is out there making it sound like they were being difficult because they are, and here's the point, they already knew they were going to bomb. That appears to be the reality. That's what Israel's openly saying right now. A week ago, they already planned the date. So Trump comes out knowing that they're acting in good faith and says they're being difficult because he knew. That's a disgustingly dishonest person. Not just dishonest. That's just wrong. It's vile. You're like, that's a bad character, guys. You're manipulating the situation, not for a good outcome, but an outcome that killed children, which we'll get to, in order to get what Israel wants at the expense of everybody else, including Trump, by the way. He says Trump later said that he would prefer it if the U.S. did not have to use military force, but sometimes they have to do it. Oh, okay. So again, in retrospect, when he said that, he knew he was going to bomb them. Again, let that sink in, guys. When he came out and pretended to you that he was the peace president and said, I don't want to have to use military force, they'd already decided to use military force and when to execute it. This is how little they think of you, how little Trump thinks of you. So, that in mind, here is the actual foreign minister from Oman today saying, I am, and this is at 6 a.m. So basically would have been, I guess for me, that would have been about 4 or 5 hours after it happened. He says, I am dismayed. Active and serious negotiations have yet again been undermined. Neither the interest of the United States nor the cause of global peace are well served by this. And I pray for the innocents who will suffer. I urge the United States not to get sucked in further. This is not your war. Guys, everyone sees what's happening. Everybody. Now, think about what his meeting with Vice President Vance and all their big talk about peace. They knew what they were going to do. They put on fronts. They had meetings and discussions and acted all about peace and happiness, knowing they were already going to bomb people. These are very bad people. Now, here comes Loomer Thomas Massie needs to be investigated. Who is leaking to Massie? And she says, leaking classified information is a crime. Charles Downs says at 2 a.m., Thomas Massie was already posting attacks on what American strikes in Iran 1 full hour before they were officially announced. What a coincidence. Hopefully nobody is leaking classified information. Oops. The information was widely publicly available at the time Massie posted. He even linked a news article. Conservative influencers were even posting about the strikes prior to Massie's post. Okay, I genuinely think this is her stupidity. I don't think this was an accident. I think this was them. Somebody fed this to them. Or rather, here's what I think. Charles Down is either stupid or manipulative, and he's literally from Loomer Unleashed. How embarrassing. And he gets this wrong. Probably because somebody sent him a screenshot with a bad timestamp because they're in a different part of the world, and they're too dumb to realize that times are different in other places of the world. So they do this, and they get it wrong. And as I jokingly said, calling to be investigated, saying that he's leaking classified information. And I simply said, oops, looks like Laura Loomered herself again. Let's start that trend. Loomered is a bad thing, right? Let's turn the word around because that's what they're doing. Either way, think about how crazy this is. Now, one of the thought is that this is them trying to gaslight around the only person who's actually calling, well, I think one of the few who's calling this what it is. And this is a huge support. Apparently, Loomer, here, since I just saw this before, I'll grab this. I didn't even read it all the way through. I'm going to look at it later. Let's see what it says. Apparently, Loomer just spoke to Donald Trump. So think about what she is and what she's doing. Embarrassingly incorrect all the time, sort of like Alex Jones, by the way, and comes out and says, just spoke to Donald Trump because she's got his ear, because that's how gross and weird this all is, and says, or she lied about it, which wouldn't surprise me, and congratulated him on another successful combat mission. You know, aside from the hundreds of children they killed, right, Laura? Eradicating one of the world's most vile Islamic terrorists. Oh, really? Despite from that not even remotely being the reality, it turns out he might not even be dead, but that's still up in the air as well. I told Trump he's made the United States proud. That's not even what most people think on his side. Laura is a shameless, blind Zionist, Israel blind team sport player. I also told him, everyone who loves America hates terrorism, is cheering for the... That's just her very, I think she thought smart way to manipulate you into going, well, I like America. I'm not a terrorist. I hate that too. I agree with Trump. Or you can go, I like this country and I hate terrorism, and he's also ridiculous and wrong and lying and cheating and stealing, because I'm not a child, Laura. But it says, we should be all cheering for America and Trump today. Hoorah! President Trump's made so proud to be American. Dingoism. That's what she's doing. Cheer, cheer, hooray. You forgot your flashy red lights and your hashtag breaking. But overall, it's just I cheer for Trump's thing, even though it's a shockingly obvious crime. Now, let's talk about the crime. Trump's unprovoked attack on Iran has no mandate or legal basis. Now, this is the important part from the beginning. We have to be honest about this, if we are honest at all about anything. This was unconstitutional and illegal. Nobody disagrees with that. The only argument is, well, nobody else had to do it. I mean, are we actually in kindergarten? Are we letting those kind of arguments? Yeah, apparently that's the highest level of the conversation. Well, I don't disagree, guys. Congress has become ridiculous. It's useless, meaningless. They no longer do what they're supposed to do. And I think that's the same problem, that they have been manipulated into, standing, just being doing nothing when, they could support it too, right? They could vote and go, yeah, invade. That's what I think is probably the obvious point. All of them support this. So why don't they do it then? You see what I'm saying? I think it's about more so changing the way that our governance, this is the reimagining of the way our system works, guys. But the point is that this is against the law because it's supposed to be approved by Congress. Even just bombings, in particular, going to war, but even just acts of war, right? So he didn't do that. So first and foremost, yes, we all have to agree that is a crime. But then we can also stand back and go, okay, but no other president over the last, from Bush to Obama, they're not doing that. So that matters. We should include that and then ask ourselves whether maybe Trump had no choice. That's worth considering. But then if he knew that was the reality, then there would have still been a legal pathway to do this the right way. And he still didn't do that either. But if it's talking about whether Congress did this, there's no other point. He broke the law in doing this. But then you can even go further and realize that, okay, well, there was no provocation. You can't say they're evil and bad and that's a threat to us. That's not a legal argument. No court in the world, unless it's manipulated, will argue that makes sense. Where's the threat? Even from a Bethlehem doctrine of preemptive self-defense, which is a laughable joke. And they use, like we saw now, we said they were doing bad things and they don't need to prove it. We just get to bomb them and claim we stopped them from doing something. It's such a childishly obvious ploy. Even if there is eventually a point that's happening, they could lie about it whenever they want. And we all know that. So there was no threat. Iran was not threatening action other than responding to what they were doing. Iran was not invading foreign countries. Iran was not doing anything that resembles a threat to anybody, let alone a threat to U.S. interests or the country, Americans. So there is no misunderstanding that this was a crime. But I just think it's important to recognize those who are out there trying to grapple, trying to, make sense of why this is okay. The first war of Donald Trump's Board of Peace era has begun. An unprovoked attempt at regime change in collaboration with Israel, with no legal foundation. And remember, they told you this wasn't regime change. We don't want to change the regime. We're not crazy. Well, and here they are, literally calling for regime change. Just like they did every other place they said that wasn't going to happen, like Venezuela or Bolivia or every other country they've illegally regime changed. There is no legal part of what they're doing here, guys. It says, with no legal foundation, launched in the midst of diplomatic efforts, which is just a salt in the wound. They did that in order. You know what it shows you? Weakness. They need them to have their guard down because I don't think we'll get into whether or not they might very well be losing all this right now. But the point is you have to pretend to be in negotiations so you can get a one-up on them, which is just, bad form. Now it says Trump's record 8-minute address after the first bombs had fallen made clear that this would be no limited strike aimed at cajoling Tehran into concessions at the negotiating table, which they all limited strikes and we get, to get them to respond. And even though why we would think that bombing a country would get them to come to the table to negotiate, that's strong arm tactics. That's what they do. And they would not accept that from anybody else. They would immediately go to full war like everybody else has the right to do. And they'll call terrorism when they do it too. He warned that if Iran's military did not surrender, they would be killed. And the country's armed forces and its missiles and navy would be smashed. Oh, great. So what you're saying is that you're now going to invade the country if they don't just do what you want? How would you possibly then kill all of their military? I mean, you have to understand, guys, there's no way you don't see what's happening here. You're standing at a podium and demanding action from a foreign country. If any country, anybody, whether it was Iran or you could say, what if the UK stood up and said, the US government, we demand that you do this because you're terrorists. If you don't, we'll bomb you. And if you don't come to a deal with us, we'll bomb you too. Think about that in the context of the West. What would you call that? How would that make sense if the UK just decided that? And you know what's even crazier? They wouldn't even be wrong. Because what the US government does all around the world, UK too, are criminal acts, guys. And they would be right to say, you're breaking the law. But they still would be wrong in going in that direction. The right path would be to bring this to the international conversation like they tried to do with Israel. And we can see how that's failing. That doesn't mean we stop trying to go about this the right way. There are other paths to be taken in that direction. They just haven't been taken yet because the individual person like us has no power in that conversation. But we still can't change this. And we are. It's not easy. Nothing in any real sense that is worth doing is ever truly easy. Think about that. It's the same as like everything else we're talking about. It's just it's doing it the right way matters. And look, if we can't stand on a side note, recognize the win that it is that what we have done, look at the conversation. Look at where we are. We are unraveling the broken nature of the global dynamic. Not to say that we're going to succeed or that it will change, but look at what we've accomplished. Just by forcing this conversation about any of these topics, we now have this on the table. Everyone's talking about it. How is that not a win? Sorry to, I digress and get into that, but man, I think it's important to think about that. Back to the point. He says the way would then be open for the Iranian opposition, right? The groups that have no right to be in power. The Shah, the son of the Shah, but democracy. He's the crown prince of democracy, as Robert called it. They're laughing at you guys. And they would, and the country's ethnic minorities to rise up and bring the regime down. The exact same ethnic minorities that they're killing in Syria right now, but no big deal. Quote, it's time for all people of Iran, Persians, Kurds, Azeris, how do I pronounce that one? Balachis, and I don't mispronounce them, to shed from themselves the burden of tyranny and bring forth a free and peace-seeking Iran. It's just laughable. Because every other example you can ever show in their entire history has led to chaos, including with Iran, by the way, in the last time. And on top of that, ask the Kurds how well it's worked out, or ask any of them, ask any group in any location. Every single time this happens, it's chaos and death and destruction for their society, for their culture, for them. Every time. And what seems to continue to proliferate are the very things they claim they're fighting. And that's only going to make sense when you eventually come to terms with the reality that they're working for the people that claim to be fighting them. Coordinating the message as well as the missiles. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country had joined the war to, quote, remove the existential threat posed by the terrorist regime of Iran. Okay, I'd love for someone to demonstrate that for me. Not in abstract terms and, terrorists and bad guys and dangerous things, but give me an example. I still would love to hear why they're an existential threat. Are they threatening to bomb something? Are they threatening to invade something? Are they threatening to steal something? No, I don't. Okay, then what are we talking about? The maximalist aims of the joint attack cast doubt on whether there had ever been any prospect of success for the UN-Iranian negotiations. Yes, very, very soft way of saying it's easy to prove they never cared in the first place. But realize, again, the idea, what was it? I was going to add one point. I think I just lost it. The existential threat point. Anyway, I think I made that clear. I think it's very important to recognize that I think what I was going to say is the only threat is this boogeyman in the shadows, which certainly could be the reality. In fact, I think that's what the ones pointing the fingers thrive in doing. And in many cases, fund and arm and puppeteer the ones they point to. And even maybe an Iranian or a Muslim or whatever, and you could prove that they're back there pulling their string. But that's in some cases. The point is that even, let's just say you're talking about the idea that this country somewhere might in the shadows be planning something. How is that enough to justify what we're talking about? And if flat, my opinion, and I think with the evidence we have, you can quite literally prove that's not even happening. At the very least, that you can't prove it's happening. And I think that's easy to see. All you have is them claiming they're doing bad things because we're experts. Yeah, I think we learned how that worked through a lot of the different psyops over the last 10 years. Trump has long railed against the folly of the Iraq war. He campaigned twice on a platform of ending U.S. military entanglements abroad. I played the clips for you recently, and lobbied aggressively to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Think about that. Based on his factually shaky claim of ending 8 wars. It really bothers me that even The Guardian can't be like, that's flatly incorrect. I can quite literally prove to you that that's not true. Here are the facts. You see what I'm saying? There's always a game going on here. Of all the things that we know for a fact aren't true, you can't even be honest about that. And the things that are actually watered down or like unclear, you then lean into. That's corporate media for you. It's ridiculous. He did not end 8 wars, guys. That's ridiculous. He still pretends Israel and Gaza is one of them. They're still killing people. It's not even worth pretending. The only people that say these ridiculous things are blind followers. Barely 10 days before launching the war, he had hosted the inaugural meeting of his Board of Peace 10 days before launching a war on Iran, which was supposedly going to resolve conflicts, not just in the Middle East, but around the world. Totally not a globalist agenda, though, guys. That meeting brought leaders and senior officials from 27 disparate states, of course, most of them autocracies, to Washington to praise Trump, the peacemaker. But then, however, most of Washington's traditional allies in Europe and beyond had become deeply skeptical of Trump's motives and stayed away. The Board of Peace was sold to the UN Security Council in November and then later presented to Davos because he totally is fighting the globalists, guys, in November as the only path to ending the slaughter in Gaza. But it had been clear long before the first missiles fired at Iran that it was a bait and switch scam. This is from The Guardian. It's interesting to me. It says the UN, the United Nations even, to Trump's Board of Peace proposal. The UN thought it was actually buying one thing, but it was sold something quite different. A rival body to the Security Council, but one in which Trump would be in charge. The fact that even The Guardian is pointing this out, and for the same reason, by the way, you should ask, because they're pointing it out, maybe that means that's not the case. That's always worth considering. But I think it's pretty easy to see. I'll just bring the show in that this is what it is. Gaza's Board of Peace seeks to reimagine the international order. Even The Guardian is pointing out the example. Even the UN seemed to acknowledge that it was such a Security Council, global UN adjacent thing. He's just trying to redesign and take control. Remember, he made himself the forever emperor of the Board of Peace. The attack on Iran is a clear violation of the UN Charter. It is. In any absence of any credible, imminent Iranian threat to the U.S. You see, now what they mean by that is an actual threat to an attack on the U.S. The U will never get there because it's not happening. And it says, in an attempt at justification, Trump spoke in generalities, denounced the Tehran leadership as a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. So pretty much a description of every government in the world, and 47 years of enmity between the U.S. and Islamic Republic. Over that half century, Iran has arguably never posed less of a threat than now, which is an objective point and actually very relevant. Even if you think that's what they were, right now, I'll read what this paragraph I think is very well received. It says, over the last century, they've never posed less of a threat than they do right now, weakened by the joint attack by the U.S. and Israel in June, which degraded its defenses. According to Trump, he told you is obliterated. Decades of sanctions combined with economic migration, has brought mass protest to the street. Now, that's not exactly, there's more to it and it's more new, but what you're saying is you've been doing this to them. You've been whittling it down. You collapsed their financial, their rial, their money. How are they? And on top of everything, you just obliterated their nuclear program. But we're going to be told that they're more of a threat now to justify something you've never even done before. Outside, in the sense, let's just say since 73. At least I even walk that back a bit. But that's what I think this is going to go to. I hate to say that, but I do. I think this is not going to, unless something shifts, this is going to keep going forward, I think. I hope that's not the case. In the Board of Peace, however, there is no requirement for Trump himself to justify what he's doing. Think about that. There are no rules other than those giving Trump the power to make them up as he goes along. It has become increasingly clear the board is not primarily a form of resolving conflict, but a vehicle for the president's political and financial interests. Pretty much like everything else he's doing, which again is no different than every one of them, left and right. Wilbur Ross, Commerce Secretary in Trump's first term, said the court defeat made an attack on Iran more likely. Now they're talking about his previous defeats in court. And the argument genuinely being, like I was saying earlier, that just because he lost in court, then he'll want to attack Iran to make like the Netanyahu point. He says, I don't think he can take this loss and then be seen as backing down on Iran. Like these are the sociopaths we're dealing with. You're going to bomb a country because you feel like you look weak? Pretty much. The cloud of suspicion over Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein also drove him to maybe distract from what's going on. Trump is clearly counting on spectacular success in Iran, broadcast live, to bring his country along with him after the fact. Before his overnight recorded statement, there had been no real effort by the administration to lay out a convincing case to Congress or to the nation, at a time when polls suggest only a quarter, if not less, of the U.S. electorate support this war. Regular on-camera press briefings of the Pentagon, which used to happen all the time, have ceased to exist right now. But the recently renamed Department of War hasn't even held one since December. Congress, which means they're just not, they don't think about the idea they're most transparent. They're giving you less information than ever. Under the guise that they're like fighting Democrats or whatever. We can't show it because then they'll counteract us. Well, whatever the reason, that's ridiculous, first of all. Whatever the reason, you're giving us less. That's not transparency. That's the opposite. This is like the whole thing they're doing right now in every category. Congress, which in theory has the constitutional, you know what I mean? In theory, what does that even mean? Congress obviously has that power. You can look it up. You think these journalists couldn't figure that out? So why would they write it as Congress in theory has the pejorative? No, they do. It's easy. It's a fact. I know sometimes I may read too much into these kind of things, but to me, I feel like that's a larger effort to actually change the way we think about these things. It's important to understand that they are bound by that. But it says, in theory, has the constitutional prerogative to decide whether America goes to war. And it has been almost totally sidelined. Yeah, exactly. They do have that power, and they have abdicated. We know that. But it doesn't change the fact that it's still illegal. Now, the point is always, guys, there was the tweet that I'll read in a second, but just because, let's just even say it's been hard, they want a war and Congress is not going to let it happen. And that's the argument they're using. Well, Congress hasn't, they'll stop them from everything they want. Well, yeah, man, that's the way that's supposed to work. Going to war is not supposed to be some simple thing that everyone agrees on. The whole point is it's supposed to be a process to initiate war, not defend yourself, but initiate war, because there are even arguments in regard to responding to an attack. That's why they play the preemptive card, to try to blend those fields. But this is something else. 8 congressional leaders from both parties were briefed on classified information a few hours before the State of the Union speech. State of the Union. But Democratic senators emerged saying that they had not been given a good reason. Again, it's very clear. They were planning this attack long before we got here. In 2003, the road to the war in Iraq was paved with lies about WMDs that didn't exist. The path to a new conflict in Iran 23 years later has been lined largely with incoherence or silence. The Iranians, quote, have come to the conclusion. Now, this is actually really important. And this speaks to the whole North Korea point, guys. And I've often thought over the years that this might be what they're trying to just sort of create with this absurd game. He says, quote, the Iranians have come to the conclusion that restraint has been interpreted as weakness and invites more aggression. Well, yeah, it does when you're dealing with monsters and sociopaths. You see, the point is not to then be might makes right. Strength, peace through strength. That really means just attack and we want and pretend we're being just in this mindset. But ultimately to not be weak in the face of people that are obviously belligerent. See, it's a different situation. So in this case, Iranians, and I made this point about Russia and Iran and numerous parts during Syria's before we got to where we are now, where many times you saw something happen where they could have responded and chose not to. Now, I don't know whether it was restraint or something else, because I think Russia is more in line with Israel on a lot of things today than, and always have been, by the way, but more now than for a lot of reasons. But you wonder, where was it? Anyway, just that, that ultimately that it might be about, I just lost that. Damn it. The same point. There was an extra point that I was going to add to it, and I hate when I do that, and I shouldn't even say it out loud, but I'm just me. But the Iranians have come to the conclusion that the restraint has been interpreted as weakness. And so the large point that I'm making is that ultimately they've driven this to the reality, right? And that, like North Korea, they again, so we're told, they make a nuclear bomb, and then when's the last time we even heard about North Korea? And so what they're ultimately trying to drive is them to do that. I don't think they are. I think the reality is they've never, because it's a fatwa, they've said they never religiously are going to seek a nuclear bomb. They've said that as far as I've been doing this. But ultimately now what they're talking about is their response in regard to their bombings. So there'd be a bombing and they really wouldn't respond. They'd be measured. They'd show restraint. They'd plan, right? But in this case, they've already responded. We're going to get into that next. They've already bombed back. And so what and then what Israel's already doing, they're bombing and killing people. We told you Iran's a terrorist. Even though it's obvious that you're responding, they have the legal right. So what he's saying is that they've realized that we're just not going to play the restraint card. Even though that's what arguably would be the best thing for the world. And that's the whole point, is that they're trying to point to everyone else and say they're doing this when they're the ones doing that. And anyone shows restraint, groups like the Zionist maniacs in Israel will take advantage of that. And then it causes this kind of point on this knife's edge military standoff all over the world. And you could even talk about Pakistan and India and plenty of other examples that Israel is without question involved in. It means something, guys. This is important. Now, he added that Iran's capacity to wreak damage on its enemies has not really been tested. Now, what they're saying is that the restraint has always been there, even in the last responses. And frankly, I agree with that. If you talk to any real experts, nonpartisan, they'll tell you this every time. And I've been hearing this my entire life, that ultimately Iran is, if not able to meet their match the U.S. is outmatched. But of course, everyone's going to argue the opposite. But it says in the 12-day war, the Iranians didn't use any of the military capabilities that they have developed over many, many years to target U.S. assets, like short-range missiles, cruise missiles, naval assets, drones, underwater drones, anti-ship ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles. What's funny is people read that and go, terrorists! Literally everything that all of them are using. It's just bad when they do it, right? But the reality clearly is that they have defend themselves like anything else. That's why the missile point became a problem, because they're just trying to diminish Iran's ability to actually have a defense. But on top of that, knowing that they're never going to give up the ability to just have defense missiles, so they make that the sticking issue and lie that that's because nukes, and it's just not. Iranian forces would have a wide range of targets close at hand, including vessels, military, commercial, Strait of Hormuz, right? The reality is they put their ships there that they didn't need there in order to fire, I believe, in order to give them a target. They're trying to bait them into killing Americans so they can use that as the blind rush justification, like with, after 9/11, it was just like anyone trying to say that we should have restraint were called un-American. And that's always the way it goes. But when you have a certain level of hype and propaganda, it can overshadow logic. And that's always what they do. And I think that's what this is about. In all years of war games in Washington and in the Pentagon and with all the think tanks, without exception, they say 1 or 2 warships would sink in their war games. And he says, obviously, it would push Trump to retaliate in a devastating manner. But then he would have launched another war in the Middle East, which he already has. There is no way that Trump can frame that as a victory. His presidency will be completely eclipsed by that. Yeah, I think that's where we already are. Now, this one's interesting. This is Israel stating they had this planned. U.S. and Israel launch preemptive attack, which again is such a joke. Preemptive what? What were they planning? I mean, you can't keep they're building a bomb maybe in the future. Preemptive attack. I mean, that's just lazy, and nobody falls for this stuff anymore, other than those that are, in my opinion. And I should when I say those things, and I shouldn't even say it like that because I tend to be hyperbolic. I genuinely think that what I'm saying is I think the vast majority very clearly see this, and then the ones that are out there yelling about it are the ones that likely know they're wrong or don't care one way or the other. But as always, there's probably a middle ground of some grouping that either isn't even paying attention or does, something. But I should be specific as always, but I do think it's the vast majority. Now it says Israel said it launched a preemptive attack against Iran on Saturday. Israel, citing a U.S. official, reported that the New York Times, citing this official, reported that U.S. strikes on Iran were underway. A source told Reuters that Iran's Supreme Leader, Khamenei, was not in Tehran and had been transferred to a secure location. Now, this is interesting to me because this came out early. This was like right in the beginning, like pretty much right after the bombing took place. So following this, they've argued that they killed him. But the earliest reporting I can find is that they took him away to a secure location, and he was, unless they bombed that location, which nobody seems to be arguing, it seems likely that he wasn't killed. But that's up in the air. And by the way, in the chat, if there's been more information, please let me know, because this is all developing as we go forward. Now it says the attack, coming after Israel and Iran engaged in the 12-day war in June, follows repeated U.S.-Israeli warnings that they would strike again if Iran pressed ahead with its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. For the record, I am watching both chats, Rumble included, so please include me and inform me if anything is important. The point here, that they'd strike again if they pressed ahead with their programs, but they made it very clear to include ballistic missile, which that's never been on the table. I mean, you might as well include, pocket knives or, that's ridiculous. But the point is something that it's like, really? Yeah, I mean, walk it back to just guns then, it's insane to think that makes sense. Okay, so they're saying Iranian media has confirmed that he's dead. But again, that keep a grain of salt as we go through this. Now, that will flavor what we're going to go through in a second, but that does make a big difference if that's what they're saying. Continuing, the state of Israel launched a preemptive attack. This is Israel's statement. Yes, people are saying, it looks like Robert in the class is reported as well. So they might have, it looks like they likely got him, which would suggest to me that either this reporting was false or that they got the location he was in. But even then, guys, and Robert would say the same, things can change a lot over so many days, is that the reporting can appear specific right now and then something could shift tomorrow. But if Robert's reporting that, I would argue that's likely what's going on. But it continues that the Israeli defense official said that they had, this one first. The state of Israel launched a preemptive attack against Iran to remove threats to the state of Israel. So they didn't even include U.S. in that, right? Think about what they're saying. We attack them preemptively because they're a threat to us. What I think this is showing you is that U.S. is just being dragged into this. And look, remember the reporting right before this? What they were all saying is that arguably that what they wanted was Israel to attack. Or rather that they wanted, both of them were saying they wanted the other one to attack. Whatever. At the end of the day, it seems most likely that Israel ultimately did this because they saw the opening that they couldn't refuse. They could do it. Trump would own it because he would have to, and then it could get the best of both worlds. And it says an Israeli official, where was I? Defense official said the operation has been planned for months in coordination with Washington, and the launch date was decided weeks ago. So they said we've launched a preemptive attack. So they're saying that we planned this with the U.S. government because they're a threat to the state of Israel. And let's be clear, that's what Lindsey Graham has said. That's what Cruz has said. That's what Rubio has said. So how is this America first? The U.S. and Iran renewed negotiations in February in a bid to resolve the decades-long dispute through diplomacy and avert the threat of military confrontation. No, well, they didn't, because they're lying, since they did this weeks ago. Weeks. So at minimum in the middle of February. It says Israel, however, insisted that any U.S. deal with Iran must include, that this is what they always do, it's called a poison pill, the dismantling of Tehran's nuclear infrastructure, not just stopping the enrichment process, and lobbied Washington to include restrictions on missiles. Which it appears as if they were probably going to say yes to that too. That's where it feels like this was going. Fine, we'll give you everything. And they just knew, I think not because they probably were going to, because they called their bluff. Like Hamas did 3 or 4 different times, knowing that they were like, fine, we'll give you that. You're go. And then Israel would bomb because they didn't want to allow the deal. And I would go even as far as to say that Hamas probably would have taken it at the end point, but they just knew that Israel wasn't honest. That's my opinion. And I think the same thing's happening here. Iran said it was prepared to discuss curbs on its nuclear program in exchange for lifting sanctions, but ruled out missiles. Tehran would also said it would defend itself against any attack. Now, remember, the point is the Oman foreign minister said that basically in between the 2 days, they had basically put on the table almost everything. Let's see. So this is Reuters. Iran supreme leader killed, Iranian state media confirms. Now, this is just confirming. Now, again, to be clear, this is obviously likely what's happening at this point. And I think the only reason I'm saying it like that is because it's the situation we're in, and that there's so many ways that deep fakes, lies, especially in the midst of one of these things. So based on, what we can confirm, or the level to which we can confirm in moments like this appears to be that. But wait until tomorrow or the next day, and these things tend to flesh out a little bit further, is all I'm suggesting. And on top of that, I saw reports like this from corporate media earlier in the day that are still, I don't think even that time were even confirmed. It's more like the reports were going around. But either way, this is what they were trying to accomplish. So ask yourself, if Iran had unilaterally decided that the U.S. government was a criminal organization and then executed Trump with an attack, what do you think they would do? Well, would you argue they have a right to respond? You probably would, wouldn't you? So ask yourself whether or not this is, is it only okay when they do it? Is there a principle thing? Is there a legal reality? Or is it just the U.S. and Trump can do what they want because we're in charge? Because that really is what's guiding this right now. That they're in charge. We're in control. And that's alarming because, first of all, Democrats will have that power soon enough if that's how you view the world. But the reality is the government should not be given unilateral authoritarian power. Never works out in our benefit. Now, this is from the 27th. The U.S. State Department ordered the removal of a number of diplomats, right? So just to point out again that they were in the day they were negotiating, rather the day before, they were already removing diplomats from Israel. So they already knew, which you already know. I mean, it's based on the information we have, but just more and more, it's clear that they were fronting about having negotiations while planning to attack. Liam McCollum also points out something interesting, that, for all the Christians and the Christian right and all the argument that Trump is, all the people faking what they are, in my opinion, in order to align themselves with a very powerful Christian movement. Preemptive strikes violate Christian war theory. Just in case you wanted to know that. Like realizing that you rationalize the killing of children in Gaza, for example, you're a disgusting person pretending to be a Christian, if that's your mindset. That's what I believe, by the way. I think that's horrifying. That pastors or Christian out there going, I stand with Israel. Well, you're a monster and you're not a man of God. can be contentious all you like. I think that's obviously the case. And so if you're out there in this case and you believe and you practicing Christian values or whatever you think are the values of not blindly attacking people, the point in this is for the Christian right. Then they just told you preemptive strikes because X, Y, and Z. Well, then that should be a challenging point for you. For most of them, I think it's a team game in regard to the partisan sides. Now, again, I just think that this is an obvious point to take away. The Board of Peace launches its first war. How many more will we see? Now, on the Khamenei point, which is now, adjusted with the recent statements, but let's just still go through what we had here, which I find interesting, because it may add more to your mindset. As first of all, as Ollie points out, and I agree with this every time, Israel officials say is what we first got about him being killed. So in that point, that should be considered psyop or false or inconclusive until Iranian media confirms it, which is where we are now. But so always think like that. Now, Trump came out 4 hours ago, or rather the White House posted this because Trump posted it and says, Khamenei, one of the most evil people in history. It's just think about saying something like that. What do we normally think of? Hitler or Stalin. Okay, right? You want to try your best to conflate, to in any way argue those things are even remotely the same. And I mean like with evidence, not the bombastic allegations from ridiculous people like Trump who are openly committing genocide while they lie to you about those allegations, or Obama or Biden or the rest. It's just insane that we could pretend that. The leading state sponsor, they'll still tell you, well, you can prove that's not true. But yeah, we'll just go along with this. They literally executed this man. And even if he was the worst person in the world, I thought we were better than this. I thought we were supposed to have evidence and trials and, just not just literally assassinating people because you've decided they're bad. Everything about this shows you that they are not what we want this country to be. This is not only justice for the people of Iran, which is not what they wanted, but for great Americans, for all great Americans. Right. So if you don't like it, you're not great. Literally what he's writing right there. And those people from many countries throughout the world that have been killed or mutilated by Khamenei. It's just, gosh, it's so gross. I mean, but look at the comments, guys. I mean, this is a Republican-led platform, and it is it's just all of them. Everyone sees this. John Kennedy comes out and says, Khamenei chose war. Oh, did he? He paid with his life. What war are we talking about, John? You want to point the war that Iran is conducting? What country are they invading? Where are their troops invading? Please, please, please find the courage to call this out. It could not be more obvious. Now, this person at 2:33 today. Now, this is, hold on. This says, he's students yesterday from today. Oh, that's I'm trying to find what his job title is. And I think he is part of the military, or at least connected to it. But so this was kind of presented as an official. He is Iranian, obviously, but I believe he is connected to the actual government military. He says, I am writing to inform you that Khamenei is in complete health and safety. Just like during the 12-day war, which they did say that then as well, currently commanding the war scene against the global arrogance and defending the noble nation of Iran. Do not doubt the promise of the great architect of the revolution, Khamenei the Great, and the banner, he's the great, right? The point is he's alive. That's what he's trying to say. So clearly there is a propaganda political point for lying about that, to maintain support and strength and whatever else, right? But as Robert and the Iranian media are saying, he's been killed. So you should question why he was putting that out, which is probably controlling the narrative. Now, Kit Clarenberg on the other side of this, which again should be just as we should be skeptical and question all of this, adds something interesting about Netanyahu. Now, again, in the chat, let me know if you've seen any update on this. He's saying unconfirmed reports using the maritime tracking, or rather, I guess specifically, that maritime, I have that one too for the ships. We'll get to it in a second. But for the flight navigation tracking, that you can basically see that that Netanyahu, or at least a plane that he's associated with, was trying to flee. That's the argument. Saying unconfirmed reports of Khamenei being dead are to distract from Netanyahu having fled Israel for Cyprus, but then got rejected from Cyprus and having to resort to seeking refuge in Berlin. This is a complete disaster for the Israeli government. Far too many people who should know better still believe in the empire's military invincibility. But again, this appears to, at least I'm leaning in the direction that this is less, that, well, I guess both could be true. That Khamenei could have been killed, but they also could have been fleeing Israel. And this might not even be a sign of weakness, or rather not in the weakness of them losing, but just Netanyahu's weakness of not wanting to be held accountable for what he starts, in the sense of like being potentially bombed, right? So this is where we get to this point. I just include this in the weirdness of all this. I said it already, but I'll just include it. You guys can look at her full video here talking about how they know this is a fake. A complete absence of natural breathing patterns, spontaneous illustrators, small fluctuations in Trump's facial musculature. I mean, these are all valid points. I still don't know that it proves this, at least that I can't verify all the things she's claiming necessarily. But as I said, Grok said the same thing, weirdly enough. But let's do this. I always find this so interesting because I've done this before and it changes its answer. So it says, I said, is this an AI video? And it's the link to the Twitter version of the YouTube video, which I hate. They do that. You can see it's right there. And it says, yes, it's AI generated deep fake video. Okay, so let's do this. Actually, no, I forgot. If you change it, the link then forever changes. So let me do a new one real quick. And just ask the same question and see what it says. Let's see. If it still says it, that would be interesting. Yeah. Yes, this appears to be an AI-generated deepfake video. It goes to the YouTube video and it's from a USA Today channel, by the way. That's what the channel is. That claims to show full Trump speech. And it says, however, multiple sources, including on Twitter, explicitly identify it as deepfake. For example, one. So this is an example, by the way, if it is wrong, of how you can have a slanted use of just whoever's yelling things on Twitter, because nobody in the corporate media is reporting it. So they might put overcompensation, or I guess not the right word, over reliance on random accounts on Twitter, right? Anyway, just interesting. But again, very clear. I just found this fascinating, stressing the fact that it's still a coin flip in my mind. So once we get more information, we'll go further on whether or not this means any more, or whether it might be something larger. Like, obviously, from what I'm reporting, I think my opinion is clearly that they did attack. There are bombings. People did die, as we're going to get to next. And that there's a lot of lies around this as always. Maybe that's one of them. Now, this is on top of that. The UK Prime Minister came out and basically gave a statement about readiness, which then got reported as entering the war. Now, I want to be clear. I'm of the mind that they're probably already involved, and that the UK would have no qualms about giving U.S. support, but will give lip service to their own people because they're cowards and don't want to be seen for what they're doing, and they know it's unpopular. But as they said, no, he stated that he didn't enter the war, that he just simply has aircraft as a defense measure ready. Just again, there's so much misunderstanding and misattribution. It's all over the place. Now here's Massey again, stating the obvious that you can prove: acts of war unauthorized by Congress. That is a simple fact. Whether or not you agree that Congress is broken, or that they should, that Trump shouldn't have to wait for them, you could make those arguments, but you have to be honest that yes, it was still considered a crime under our legal system and the Constitution. The U.S. is attacking Iran, according to AP. And this person says, and you'll see this guy commenting all over the place, just, the same kind of blind one-sided support, saying, shut up, you grandstanding coward. Oh, really? Based on a simple statement of fact? You're a little emotional, bud. And it says, Congress hasn't declared war since 1942. Yeah, okay. We happen to, anyway, aside from the little bit of accuracy, the point at the end of the day is, yeah, so what? I agree with you. It's a valid point. But what does that mean? So you're suggesting that the law no longer matters because they've not followed it? So your argument would be for them to never follow laws ever again, because then we'll just let them go? We can't be this stupid or this manipulative. He says, you guys made yourselves irrelevant by years of inaction, and now you scream into the void. Ah, okay. Well, here's a bit of a different point to add to this, with it showing you again how he's wrong. There are very clear examples of years of inaction where, yes, they chose not to do what they should have done. But what we're talking about here, in most cases, are like, let's just take Trump right now. Did Trump go to Congress and then he was denied, so he took this route? No. He chose to ignore the process because what he said, and they're irrelevant. Okay, so that's a crime. Okay, go back one step further. How about Obama or Bush? Okay, did they go to Congress? No, they didn't. Well, in many, many cases. So the point I'm making is it's not like Congress was inactive. They were not, in many cases, given the opportunity to vote. But I'll go ahead and add, I would argue they would have probably voted for it anyway. But those are separate points. I would argue many of them would feel the need to vote one way or the other because they don't want to publicly be seen for supporting something like this. It's sort of like Elizabeth Warren on Twitter going, we don't support Iran, and then clapping for Trump when he speaks about invading Iran, right? Or bombing Iran. So what I want to point out is that by saying years of inaction, first of all, does not change the law. So it's still a crime. But that it's not that they were just sitting around twiddling their thumbs and ignoring this. There was not an opportunity to do it. They weren't going to Congress. Like Trump, they were going national security. And so what we need to do is, I don't know, Green Beret nap time, maybe start doing it again. Otherwise, maybe your argument is let it go forever, because that seems to be what you're actually saying while pretending to care about this. The Iranian people are cheering in the street. No, they're not. There are people out there, like in any circumstance, where they are cheering the support of the agenda because they're being paid. And that's in the US, that's the left, that's right, that's always a part of this. Or they're being influenced, or it's operations or intelligence. Not even remotely the majority, but my point as always, there are children being bombed. And there's Iranians talking about this. So imagine a situation where you've got Republicans fighting the government. Let's just say Democrats and Biden, okay? And they're fighting the government. And this is the equivalent of, in this case, those people, Republicans protesting Biden's administration, and then Biden bombs a school and kills all their children. And they go, well, that's bad, and we're sad for that, but it's okay though, because it's all going to work out in the end. That's what they want us to believe Iranians are doing. Literally going, yes, people are dying because US is bombing us, but they were dying before, so it's okay. That's not even, think about how insane that is. Yeah, I mean, there's some level of logic somewhere in there if that was how extreme it really was, but that's not even remotely what was actually happening. But over 100 children were killed in this school. And when asked directly about that, people in the street were saying, we want the regime out of here. We're okay. And that's insane. Iranians fighting for Iran would not be going, who cares about the kids? Let the US government come in and rule our lives. That's not what Iranian people have ever wanted and do not want now. These people just blindly repeat what the team says. Propaganda says. You're literally repeating the same propaganda outlets that you made fun of when the Democrats were in charge. They just don't seem to see it, or they don't care. Take their country back from the tyrannical sponsor of terrorism narrative, blah, blah, blah propaganda. They just repeat whatever they're told, and they're ridiculous, guys. It's all over the place. That's all in response to Massey stating a fact. Now, in regard to propaganda, this is how this is supposed to function. Nikita Bear is a Twitter guy. He's one of the Twitter employees. He says, wave of Iranian bots being filtered. Now, how many of you think for 1 second that every one of those are Iranian bots? And how many of you think that these are Iranians trying to tell you what's actually going on? And as they write, Israel's military censor operating as it's intended. You can decide. I think it's pretty clear that we see Israeli bots on here that thrive, that they don't care about. In fact, they work with the companies that use them on this platform. On top of that, suddenly Press TV doesn't work. How funny is that? Oh my God, it comes up, of course. That's so funny. Now, who knows if that's just because it got through that time? This is always the case. Robert always talks about this. What's funny to me is all day I've been trying to look just to see what Press TV was reporting. And that's the first time it's come up. That's so funny. So anyway, here's what I think it could be on top of that, is that what Robert tells me is that they're always fighting this. Press TV is constantly trying to get around Western censorship. Well, they cry foul about censors. And what they do is they redirect and they get their new sites. And so maybe that's what just happened. I don't know. But at the end of the day, in historical point, it's the same. So it is continual. And all day it's been the same way, that it has been just not loading. And the U.S. government's been very clear. In one case, it even came up with that, was it the FBI, that little symbol that says, like, this has been censored? They do it every time, guys. So this didn't really deliver the point, seeing as how it just came up. But the point is always that they're trying to censor the flow of information, both here and for Iranians. Here's an example of them propagandizing Iranians. And this just really shows you the kind of unnerving, the weird what's the right word for it? Malicious. The manipulative. Now, of course, you could argue they're doing it for the right reasons. Well, I don't agree with. But the Voice of America, Persian service, these are straight up propaganda platforms. That's what they've always been. Has been broadcasting messages into Iran addressing the Iranian people. along with Reza Pahlavi, right? So you have a news platform who is literally taking a side and going, the crown prince, but democracy though, letting him speak and broadcast to the Iranian people and saying this, and this is the son of the former Shah. They're urging the people of Iran to rise up. They're literally using the crown prince of a former dictatorship to go rise up and fight your government. Because that's going to work out. They're not going to get shot and attacked. I mean, think about, what do you think Trump would do if anybody was rushing the White House to overthrow them, whether they're Americans or not? They would shoot them. But of course, they're going to go, oh, they're shooting Iranians. And on top of that, they have shot people. They've admitted 3,000 something. But what they're telling you is, which in many cases we can prove, are armed, masked foreign agents. And then you've got Mossad and Pompeo and Trump even going, arm the protesters. I mean, guys, I've never, ever seen this situation of Iran and this ever this obvious. I've covered this probably 5 times, 6 times, and I've never seen it this obvious. It's desperation as far as I can tell. Now, on top of everything else, I mean, horrifyingly enough, it seems and remember, guys, Israel's the one that initiated this as far as I can tell. And guess what the consistency is? They killed 80 children. Well, it looks like hundreds based on the full report, but as The Guardian first reported, at least 80 children dead as missile reportedly hit school in southern Iran. And then immediately, all of the propagandists start lying about it. Now, Iran's, this is from today, Iran's parents had just dropped their children off for a class on Saturday morning when they found themselves racing back to the school gates as bombs began to fall across the country in a joint U.S.-Israeli attack. At least 80 children had been killed in a strike on a girls' school. Southern Iran, the IRNA news agency reported, with dozens more unaccounted for. Hundreds injured, by the way. As it's going to report, I think it's right here next, it is adjacent. And I don't even think it's the way they're describing it as literally right next to it, but it's in the same general complex, adjacent to, not within a naval, or I'll read what it says right here. I'll get to it in a second. Like a military training dynamic. Now, what's crazy about that is in what world do you just go, oh, well, there's military, so that's justified. Are you arguing they're using human shields here? Because you can easily prove that's not how this is happening. But they're just, Emily, what's her name, Schrader from the Israeli propaganda team, came out and made the argument that means it's justified. I mean, I feel like they've completely lost their audience. I don't think they even understand who they're talking to anymore. The people who once might have been going along with this because of the narrative I don't know of any group that's ever been like, yeah, the children can be killed because narrative. Those are monsters. Those are sociopaths. Those are Zionists and U.S. politicians. I just can't believe that. In one video circulating on social media, purportedly showing the immediate aftermath of the strike, smoke rises from a burnt-out walls and debris lies spread across the road. Hundreds of onlookers gathered at the site, some in obvious distress. Screams can be heard. Now imagine you're one of these mothers who came to get their child and watch them get blown up. Now, what do you think that does to that person? And then even worse, you look on the news and the Trump's calling you a bunch of monsters and terrorists. What do you think that does to that person? In one video, continuing, it says, Reuters said it has also verified the footage as being from the school. So this, based on that and thousands of other things, it is something that has happened. Right now, you've got Republicans out there trying to gaslight us into thinking this didn't even happen. It never ends. The school appears to be adjacent to a Revolutionary Guards barracks. If the death toll is confirmed, the school bombing would be the largest mass casualty event of the U.S.-led attack so far. Adjacent. Now, what's important about this, guys? I can prove to you right now. One, for example, that everybody knows, Tel Aviv has its main intelligence location, Israel has its main intelligence hub in the center of Tel Aviv underneath a civilian building. That's proven. On top of the fact that you can show right now that U.S. places all around the world have schools inside of military compounds. So is it suddenly evil because they teach children in the same an adjacent complex to where they have a military ground? I mean, just think about how upsetting this all is. Like it's showing you who these people are. That they're cheering the killing of a bunch of children. One, because they say, I guess Iran's situation made it okay. And then secondarily, at the same moment, you've got some of them arguing it's not even them, it's Iran, they did it. Some people arguing both and thinking nobody notices. It says across the country, Iranians said they were feeling a mixture of terror and hope as the bombings continued. Some expressed relief that the long-expected strikes had arrived, and opponents of the regime spoke of hope that they might lead to political change, but both were tempered by fear that the attacks would bring more civilian deaths to a country already reeling from recent bloodshed. The important thing here, there's a lot of people who are unhappy with their government. Look at our country. It seems to be the majority right now, but at any moment, it's half the country, if not more. If that's our going metric on why we should bomb people, then every country in the world is going to be bombed tomorrow. The reality here is that there's tons of Iranians who are very angry about many different things, some of which the Iranian government are responsible for. But if you actually listen to them before we got here, they would all tell you that none of them want foreign interference. The ones that scream that are the ones broadcasting from Israel or in some U.S. media apparatus. In general, the idea, I mean, historically, you can look, they know their own history. It's caused chaos. So that's why you get into these next arguments where they go, oh, it's okay, though, because we've already been getting killed by Iran. Therefore, their killing is okay to us. I just don't know why that makes sense to anybody. And especially since what we're talking about is hundreds of children they just killed. It says, we have endured so much grief. Despite that, we don't want to see the body bags on the streets due to U.S. and Israeli strikes. The attacks came in the middle of diplomatic negotiations between Iran, Israel, and the United States with Iran, according to the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency, HRANA, which has been documenting casualties. They claim more than 7,000 people have been confirmed dead in the protests, more than 11,000 under investigation. Now, again, Iran was saying, at least last I checked, and this was a couple of days ago, like 4,000. And if you can prove, which I believe we can, and even the unions who were supporting it at first came out and made this public statement. These are foreign masked individuals that we can prove that this has been something they've been doing. Again, it doesn't need to be argued. Israel and the U.S. have publicly made it clear that they're arming people. So by that logic, that we know that Israel and the U.S. would shoot anybody with an armed element coming up towards them. I would argue all of this is wrong. The point, though, is if you're going to accuse them of doing this, recognize the U.S. and Israel do this every single day. All of it's wrong. But on top of that, if we're talking about like an intelligence manipulation where they're bombing and I mean, what was it? Max Blumenthal, Drop Site News, plenty of them are reporting and showing you the videos of these very masked foreign individuals beating, raping, torturing people all throughout the conversation. I mean, literally in the middle of the street, like we saw with the Azov movement, like we saw in Syria, like we see anywhere these monsters get unleashed. It says the war was launched by the U.S. and Israel on Saturday morning, with Trump announcing that he was beginning the major combat operations against Iran and urging Iranians to rise up and take out your government or over your government. That's what he said. The U.S. has built a significant military presence in the region over the recent weeks, preparation for the attack. Go overthrow your government, but no big deal. We want peace. Drop Site News, small children who knew nothing of politics or wars. Now, this is just a couple quick parts on this I want you to see. Here's the image of the aftermath of the school. He says, I cannot understand how a place where children, innocent children, learn can be bombed like this, says one of the local people. We're talking about small children who knew nothing of politics or wars, and yet they are the ones paying the highest price. Some 170 students were inside the building attending morning classes when the missile struck. And apparently Drop Site News has somebody on the ground. They sent somebody here. At least 108 people were killed. According to the public prosecutor's office in Manab, many of the schoolgirls between 7 and 12 years old. I mean, think of coming off what we're all talking about in regard to Epstein and what they're doing to children and you know, all this, and then bombing a school full of children. It's too close for me to not acknowledge. Just the inhuman mindset of what they're doing in the world. And if you think for 1 second we're talking about only one side of the paradigm, you're not paying attention. Minab sits far from Tehran, the capital, but the school was adjacent to a naval base belonging to the IRGC. It says Hormozgan province, where the small city of Minab is located, borders the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most strategically sensitive waterways, which we're going to get to in a second. At last I checked, it does not appear to be shut down despite all the reporting, but we'll double check that when we get there. Let me know in the chat if something has changed. It says the school building was reduced to a massive pile of rubble. Dozens of schoolgirls trapped into the concrete. But according to Emily, it's okay because there was a military building next door. People began trying to frantically dig them out with their bare hands. Families wandered around in shock, searching for their children amid the wreckage. The final number of dead reached around half of the students in the school, so over 100. A 9-year-old student was among those killed. When we arrived at the school, the place was in chaos, her mother said. The girl's father lost his right leg during the Iran-Iraq war, did not want to speak. In a statement, President Mahmoud condemned the, quote, brutal attack by American and Zionist aggressors, calling it a barbaric act in another black page in the record of countless crimes committed by the invaders of this land. We do not understand the reasons for the U.S. attack on Iran, he said. Perhaps the U.S. administration was dragged into it. Here is what I do know. Iran will punish those who kill our children. Can you expect anything less? What do you think Trump would be saying right now? How long are we going to live like this? Why can't the United States and Israel reach an agreement with Iran and end this war? What happened is a crime, he said. Since the last war, we have not lived a stable life in our country because of the United States and Israel. Iranian state media, citing the Red Crescent on Saturday evening, said at least 201 people had been killed across the country and more than 100 injured. Excuse me, more than 700 injured. Now, as Saeed Abbas points out, and I believe this was the foreign minister, the same person as before, says the destroyed building is a primary school for girls in the south of Iran. It was bombed in broad daylight when packed with young pupils. Dozens of innocent children have been murdered in the site alone. These crimes against Iranian people will not go unanswered. Now, here's where this guy comes to insert the lie. Are you sure? I mean, think about how grotesque it is for someone like this to come in and blithely suggest that you're, with a falsified piece of information. Are you sure it was Baghdad Bob, your favorite Middle Eastern media person of the past? Guys, people are disgusting. And he points to this person saying a failed missile launch in Iran caused the projectile to fall on the school. That's the image they're all sharing. Notice anything right now that jumps out at you? I'll point it out in a second. 3.2 million views. Why? Because it's been shared and up-jumped by everybody. Everybody with reach is go this and that and, 100%. And all the people you know. Come back to that in a second. Well, here, we'll do this first. Come back to the other part. Iranian Ministry of Health, 60 martyrs so far when they reported this as they're digging them out of the rubble. Dan McAdams says the U.S. has become exactly like Israel, killing everything, military or civilian. Disgraceful. Now, here is the original post, or one of them. And it's just Max, whatever this guy's name, the real person is, citing what Dave Smith said. A bunch of Iranian children liberated already. And he says, the Iranian regime launched a rocket. It misfired and fell near a school. Now, who knows whether this guy shared this, or it looks like, let's see what the time is. This is 10:32. Curious to see if this guy only shared it afterward. Actually, I think I've got it right here. So this guy shared it first. So basically you get a guy who shares an image, and this might be shared somewhere else too, but this is what we usually see with nothing but with words. And of course, it aligns with what I want to think Max is thinking. And so we yell it at Dave Smith because he's making us look bad. So Dave Smith immediately believes it. So he puts this out, obviously, and shares the image to back up what he's claiming, that it was an Iranian rocket, right? Well, I said it never fails with these monsters. They kill children, and then their minions online rush to lie about it. Now, the first thing to point out, before you even care to ask any other thing, look into any other thing, because if you understand, the point to always understand, guys, is Grok or any of these things are not to be relied upon. They're not to be trusted, like any source or anything. Even more so, they're manipulated by other dishonest people. But I find there's useful to make this point for people who are, in a partisan game, because it's so fascinating to me to watch the right, for example, make fun of somebody for showing Grok, calling them wrong, like you're believing Grok. But that's what they're doing every day to throw in the face of Democrats. So it's like this. There's a confusing dishonesty where they can't even understand. It's like there's no self-reflection. Anyway, the point is, the first thing you should notice over everything else is the fact that there are snow on the mountains in the background. Okay? There's snow on the mountains. That's not what we're dealing with right now. That's not where they are. And even this person posts a bunch of other images showing you what the reality looks like. Okay. And then that's when you do this to make sure they are confronted with something like that, which is to show them that their platform is showing they're lying. Where's the actual post? Hold on. Here, here's just what somebody else asked. So here, Dave Smith posts this. He posted saying it's Iranian rocket. He says, obviously, here's the evidence. And this person says, hey, Grok, is that the right spot? And it says, no, that's not a picture from Iran. Not at all. The background shows mountains that are not actually from Iran. And then somebody else followed up. Oh, wait, no, I guess that's the one. Anyway, just to cut to the chase. Oh, you know what I'm doing? I'm sorry. Now I'm getting why I'm getting confused. There's another example of this somewhere else where I wanted to show you the ongoing conversation. And that's all. So basically the bottom line was simply that it's not. It's provable. You can look into it for yourself. Because of the obvious background, you can you can take a reverse image search. You can look at, there's plenty of ways to do this. On top of the fact that their own platform is telling you that it's not the reality. And Laura does the same thing. So the question is, are these people looking into anything, or are they just hearing the narrative that they know their own lying followers will manipulate, or rather, I should say, their own followers, people that somehow don't recognize that she's dishonest. That's kind of why I said that, but maybe stupid, will just share whatever you yell out on Twitter. And she says, Iran fired the missile. And of course, the timing is 10:50, right? So she's just regurgitating what somebody else posted with nothing to back it up. Sort of like eating dog food and being told that it's something else, because that's what she does. She doesn't look at it, or like Alex Jones doesn't check his facts, according to everyone that's ever worked with him, guys. We can just be honest about these things. She says, Iran fired a missile that struck the school. ABC News just looked like Iranian state media right now. Today, you will see just how many people are Iranian agents getting paid more than $7,000. They're just recycling the same things. No, oops, she lured herself again. And this will be fleshed out, guys. I'm telling you. Now, Israel made up 40 beheaded babies to justify, at least one of the many lies, to justify the genocide. Then on day one of their murderous assault on Iran, Israel murdered more than 50 schoolgirls. Only this one's real, though. Notice the difference? I mean, think about how gross that is. And we're still lying to ourselves. Some people are lying about themselves, or to themselves, about still about October 7th. And then this is what they have the nerve to come out and say. Israel has a right to defend itself. I mean, seriously, guys. And I said, they're trolling us. Like that was the immediate impression that I got. Look, they know what we're watching. They know well. Everyone knows that they just decided to attack. There was not, whether you claim there was a threat or not. Defend yourself, they're laughing when they post that. In my mind, laughing about how much they control the U.S. policy, how easy it is to influence this platform, and they just laugh. We'll literally murder a school full of kids. We'll bomb first, and then we'll claim we're defending ourselves. Look, and it's that image of all the presidents laughing in the back room. That's what they're doing. And then we told them we're defending ourselves. That's what they're doing. Kills me. And then to make it even one step further, Yair Lapid comes out and says, if everybody messes with us, this is the price they're going to pay. So if you mess with Israel, the U.S. will bomb Iran for you. The Israeli army is strong. We've got the strongest military in the world. That's laughable, which is the American Army and Navy behind us. Did you hear that? Make sure you understand this. The Israeli army is strong. We've got the strongest military power in the world, which is the army of the U.S. government. They're using you. Can we come to terms with that, please? Can we recognize that Israel is now bragging to Americans that we're manipulating Americans? We're using your military because we're that strong. And you just don't even, this is unequivocal. Trump is fighting their war. Now, Iran's foreign ministry defends retaliatory strikes because obviously Iran bombed back. Now, as of right now, since I've been live, maybe there's been more. So remember that. This is only as of when we started. But this was in response to their being bombed. So this is what actual response looks like, not initiating attacks and pretending you're defending yourself. Iran is entitled to defend itself from Israel and U.S. attacks, said the Iranian foreign minister. Quote, we have every right in accordance with international law, which if a court anywhere in the world will acknowledge that's what just happened. They will not for Israel. Of course, they might get pressured to ignore the reality, which we're seeing in the world. But it says with the UN Charter, international law, to defend ourselves with all of our might. The U.S. and Israel launched a wave of attacks across multiple Iranian cities, including Tehran, which, by the way, killed a lot of other people other than the school. But it's just why that makes sense to anybody, what the legal and like military justification for any of this was. At least 201 people have been killed, according to Iranian media so far. Iran responds by firing missiles toward Israel and U.S. military targets in multiple countries. Now, right there, they very well could have bombed those tanks, or they could have bombed the ships that were right there. That's what I think they wanted from them, and that would have been rolled into a massive response. But they didn't. Instead, or bombing the United States, right? I mean, Israel is always the case. That's always going on, but they try to use that to roll it in, but it just doesn't get the same momentum. If they had bombed anywhere even tangential, like connected to U.S., they would have used that. But they fired missiles towards Israel, military targets, right? So that's like bombing Iraq, but the U.S. base in Iraq, that's different, right? It's an extension. Like what I mean is like a inside the U.S. area or inside or bombing one of their ships. Because that would have been immediately, I mean, I'd argue even Americans against this would have then argued for a response. Also, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. Now that's really interesting to me. That I was at first I'm like, that can't even be true. But it turns out that that's what they're reporting at the very least. That's what Iran is claiming, and it does seem to be evidence of that. Now the question is why, right? Well, they argue it's because they're belligerents, and that's legally true. The U.S. is rarely attacked, which means they're involved because they're giving them support, and that is the legal reality of international law. It's the only one that seems to be actually guided by it. And it says the U.S. Israeli attacks came after a third round of indirect negotiations on Iran's nuclear program that they lied about, right? Quote, we were supposed to meet on Monday to talk about technical aspects of any possible deal. See, so not only did they meet and pretend they had agreements, but they led them on to think they were going to meet on Monday and then bomb them. Because as we know, it was planned a week before that. So they're just disgustingly dishonest. And the Americans themselves acknowledge that these negotiations went well. But then Trump lied about it in the media because they knew what they were going to do. The mediator, the foreign minister of Oman, qualified the round of negotiations as being significant progress. It was the second time in less than a year that diplomacy had been scuttled by an attack on Iran, according to the people involved. And we all saw that. Iran and the U.S. had engaged in several rounds of negotiations last year when Israel launched the 12-day war. They were like literally in the conversation, and Trump had just told them that there was going to be some kind of a conversation, and they used that to bomb. Even Iran, I think, admitted that they were taken off guard by that one, but clearly not this time, which the U.S. briefly joined despite Trump saying he was committed to diplomatic solutions. Under international law, any place, any location, any logistical support that are given, so like letting their ships refuel, for example, any support that's given to the aggressor, which is what they clearly are, is a legitimate target for the victim state. That's directly from international law. So we are not attacking any country in the region. We are friendly with all countries of the region. What we are doing is just taking defensive actions. Yeah, that's a little bit of a weird way to frame that, friends. But either way, the point is simply that they have the legal right, even though that's going to be pushed back on by them. I guarantee it. Now, Danielle Lamotas points out that they have, in more than one video, you'll find of what appear to be showing their missiles getting through. Like, so Iran bombing into Tel Aviv and showing them getting well beyond the Iron Dome. You know my opinion about the false Iron Dome and bombing the area. Now, what's ridiculous is that Israel's going, every one of them were stopped. Clearly not. It's just what they do, guys. But then, of course, I shouldn't say it like that because they're claiming that there was one person that was killed now because of their injuries. But, the point being that they're stopped all the missiles. And clearly, I don't think that's ever really the case, like the last time where Iran destroyed a lot and they tried to pretend like that wasn't the case. Here's Dubai. And this is the one I was thinking of earlier. I'll show you what I mean. Dubai airport has been recently hit. Now, here's what's interesting. This was 6 hours ago. Now, when this was posted and when I engaged with this, there had been multiple reports publicly about Dubai being hit. So this person, I just noticed it. Now look at this. They said, Grok, is it accurate? Grok says, no, not accurate. Dubai International Airport suspended all flights as a precaution. So it didn't happen. Okay. Then later somebody goes, so was it hit? Think hard. And again, it said, no, it wasn't hit. Now, I'm telling you, at that moment, I was reading this article. Dubai airport in panic. People, panic in Dubai as it is hit by an Iranian suicide drone. Now, I don't know why we would assume we know what hit it. At this point, other than, again, we know Iran says they bombed it. Now, that doesn't even, in past examples, Iran or the U.S., in respectively, have owned to actions that they actually didn't take because ultimately they didn't want to look weak to their own people. So consider all those things when we not just assume what they told us is true. This gets uncomfortable for people. They hate not knowing, but that's the reality of the world, guys. It's never clear. People are always lying to us. Just got to engage it in that way. So what I'm saying is Iran seems to have owned to bombing all these places. So my mind would be it's most likely Iran. That's where this would leave. But in regard to what maybe on top of that, where let's say tomorrow we find out the airport or a civilian location were bombed and people died. Did Iran do that? Or was that Israel's drone to make it look like Iran did that? Or vice versa. Always consider these things. And that's why you only engage with what you can prove. The rest is up in the air until you can prove more. That's what a lot of the partisanship hates because they want to be told what to think. My point, though, is that this appears to be happening. And they went on going, no, it didn't happen. I'm curious if they'd say the same right now. Now, in regard to Strait of Hormuz, the point being there is that they've bombed multiple locations. A lot of it's up in the air, so I'm going to wait until tomorrow to get more into the specifics of what actually happened, and even more so over the next week. But I think right now what we can see, it is clearly that there was bombings, and clearly this is being engaged, and I think it's not over. I think this is going to continue, and I think that it's going to be Israel trying to drive an action they can use to justify annihilating Iran. Or at least that's what they want. And I think they would want the U.S. to do that. Historically, Israel, Netanyahu in particular, has made that claim more than once, that it's important that they get the U.S. to do that. Now, the Strait of Hormuz has been a point for a long time. I brought this up probably 30 times over my time in doing this. Independent reports, oil shipments halted as Iran closes Strait of Hormuz. Now, tell me right now what you guys have seen reporting on, because last I checked, that wasn't true. Interesting to me. Now, what I read further on this was that ultimately it says right here, Iran has reportedly closed Strait of Hormuz in response to joint attacks by the United States. And the other reporting sort of saying that, no, it wasn't all transport. It was only specific things. But then I can switch this, for example, and show you. Oh, where was it? Right here, and show you that there are military that are still there. Both U.S. and otherwise. There's the U.S. one right there. USS Michael Murphy. So my point is that there's still military, and there still appears to be a lot of maritime traffic. And as far as I know, these are not exactly live, but they're live. It's not. Why isn't this zooming out for me? Come on. What's going on here? Jeez. Okay. Going back to all. And so, yeah, this to me appears to be pretty full. So what's interesting to me is why it got reported that way. I think that's about hype and trying to sell a narrative, or just worry that it will happen, right? But it really did get reported as it shut down. Most of the partisan media did that because somebody online said it, and then it got rattled through because they all want to be the first one with the flashing red light to say the thing. And a lot of times it didn't happen. But I believe this is important because it very well might happen and might already be in the process of happening. Now, that's one of the things I'm considering is that this reporting started because Iran was beginning whatever processes they go through to, prepare for that action. But again, as always, guys, realize how important this really is that at the end of the day, and now it works, at the end of the day, this is kind of a weird looking map, but you can see that's Saudi Arabia. There's Yemen. It just looks inverted almost because of the way they color it, right? But the point is, right in here, that's the Strait of Hormuz right there. This is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The point of always has been that they know Iran could potentially shut this down if they do what they just did, which would very much hurt specifically the oil industry, but most shipping. And so they've been trying to find other ways to circumvent that. And they still haven't effectively, truly taken over Yemen. So the point is that I think that's an issue. So, and that's one of the arguments why they've waited to do this, because they didn't have control over that. But so here we are where Iran is arguably preparing to do that. They'll use that as a choke point. Maybe that's why they haven't happened, because they'll use that as an argument to say, look, Iran is hurting everybody. even though that's not what they're doing anywhere else. But as of yet, it does not seem to have happened. Now, lastly, let me just update this and we'll just see what the last report was here. Yeah, this is also reporting that Iran's media is saying that he's been killed. They're saying 121 wounded on Iranian attacks on Israel. So far, the Israeli ambulance service says one Israeli woman has been killed. Oh, 120 wounded. So one person killed. Now, this happened after a massive wave of Iranian missiles attack on Israel. The Israeli military said the majority of these missiles and drones were intercepted or down, but some managed to get through. Iranian president says the head of judiciary and jurist will oversee transition. Iranians, more in Khamenei. And he says U.S. made a big mistake. Khamenei's now a martyr. Iran confirms killing. So, yeah, I mean, it seems that's pretty much where it is at the moment. Let me know if you see anything else truly developing. I agree, though. I don't know why in any real way this is going to truly bring down anything unless they go further, which is what Trump is essentially arguing. Unless the point is, and this is actually what I think is happening right now, is they know they've got assets inside of Iran. So Israel and the United States are now trying, aggressively to bring down the country from within. And then we wonder why they shut things down and why they control the flow. I mean, it's obvious what's going on here, guys. They've been telling you they've been doing it for years. So Iran's trying to stave off their invasion. And that's not the same as saying Iran, good guy, and deserves to be there. Always the assumption of partisans. The truth is simply the truth. The facts are the facts. What they're doing is a crime, and it's not justified. At the end of the day, this is about control. Always has been. Brandon P. Buck. Iran is an existential threat to the United States that requires an overwhelming force and also is so weak that it can't meaningfully retaliate. Somehow both true. Now, this is only a point from people like online and like the mindless partisan response or Israeli bots. Like the point being that in the beginning, there's such a bad threat, we have to take them out, right? But then after the fact, it becomes immediately the Israeli agenda to make them appear weak. Right? Oh, they couldn't even defend. We got through every missile, right? Every time. So he's just making a humorous point. It's just the game every time, right? There's such a bad threat, we're all going to die, but then somehow can't even stop us or retaliate. It shows you. I argue it's somewhere in the middle, but it's really just about using whatever you need to make the argument. But this person goes, they back terrorist organizations. This is just perfect. And he goes, man, do I have some news for you? It's just hilarious. Because, yeah, that's a terrorist, right, guys? And you remember we just posted this. This is his bounty page where the U.S. government literally was like, hey, get him for $10 million. And then they made him president of Syria. And Trump said, hey, he's doing a great job. I put him there. Just insane. And, yeah, he was responsible for killing U.S. troops. He's responsible for systematic kidnappings, rape, forced marriages, all the Epstein stuff. But it's okay because that's on our side, apparently, on their side. I'm speaking for Trump. So do we care about supporting terrorist organizations or just the ones that Israel points to when they don't really exist? They're funding the things that we are in the shadows. These are the terrorist organizations. All the groups that we talk about, every single one of them, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, everything, all stems back to the people that are trying to supposedly stop it. Lastly, a couple points here about misinformation. You got stuff like this, the British Patriot, apparently. Iranians flood to the streets of Western cities waving the flags. And yeah, funny, it's not true. There's protests, sure. It's all over the place. You got little pockets of, pro-Iranian. Like, what's funny is all the people out there protesting, like pro-Shah. Like, if you think into the argument for half a second, there's not a logical reason to, why are you fighting for this man? And what you find out is these are the really paid stuff that we're talking about. These are the MEK groups, and they're not real, guys. They're not Americans supporting the Iran. It's just not the reality. Or the fake Iranian women, I'm thinking of specific people, not just any woman. The ones out there, I forget her name off the top of my head. The token Iranian woman that the U.S. points to. Oh, and she screams the thing, and she works for the U.S. government. Literally paid by the U.S. government. But on top of that, here's what Grok has to say. No, the protests shown in that collage are not in support of the U.S. and Israel attacks on Iran. Quite the opposite in most cases. But that doesn't matter, though, because look, they've got flags. So that must mean no, some of them have Shah flags, right? Because they're the ones protesting for support of the Shah. The point, though, is that at most of these protests, they're supporting Iran in opposition to the U.S.-Israel attacks. And they'll show the token flag or whatever, like the Nazi flag of the trucker convoy. It never ends. U.S. strikes Iran, protests are up worldwide. I'll include some articles discussing the many different examples of people standing up and challenging what the U.S. is doing. Photos show global reaction to U.S. Israeli strikes. As Jason Bassler says to finish, let me get this straight. The peace president just launched a new forever war with Iran at 1:40 a.m. alongside Israel, despite 7 in 10 Americans opposing it, while every American newborn already enters the world $113,000 in debt from the last Middle East disaster, and Trump really just said American troops will die to liberate the Iranian people. He did, by the way, in that tweet, in that speech. Same script, new war, different president, same war machine. Glenn points out the 2024 post, the pro-peace ticket, one of the most shamelessly fraudulent presidential campaigns in American history. And here's that guy again. He says, give us a break. Pro-peace doesn't mean you need to be the prostitute of the world. Iran is the most destabilizing force of the Middle East with tentacles all over the world. Again, I'd love to see you break one of those points down. Show me just one example. So neutralizing Iran is a peace effort, evidenced by how surrounding nations have reacted. Just narrative on top of narrative. No, they're not really reacting like that. No, that's not actually what's happening. No, they're not. But you could disagree with me. Maybe I'm wrong. I just think it's hilarious that you got these armchair experts that just regurgitate whatever Trump yelled out on Truth Social when there's nothing to back it up, but they act all smug and different. Like, you're just so dumb. I can't believe you don't know the thing Trump just said. It kills me. But the idea that in any sense ever that bombing a country without provocation is in any way peace at all, even if it ends up achieving no more war, it's still not peace, guys. You're talking about an act of war. You could argue that acts of irrational, one-sided war could lead to no more war. I would still not call that peace because it's ruling by war and threat of it. You see my point, guys? Like, this is just bad logic. And on top of the fact that, what do you mean a prostitute to the world? Who's doing that? And it says Iran is the most destabilizing force. The same point. There's zero to back that up. It just kills me. Here, this other similar account. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's not the same one. That's anyway, I'm trying to think of the other one I was thinking of. But this one simply says, I agree. This is Trump in 2023. Or 2013, excuse me. Be prepared. There's a small chance that our horrendous leadership could unknowingly lead us into World War III. He's got so many of these saying that Obama's going to lead us to war with Iran because he can't. And here we are. Oops. And this is him doing it even though he knows we see that, which shows me he's not in control. And this person says, I agree that our horrendous leadership led us to World War III. What do you think, TLAV? I agree. He's talking about Trump. Dave Smith simply called him a traitor, pointing back to this same post. And funny to read some of the comments. Matt Ryan says, thread of MAGA influencers, and I'm so glad he started with Nick Sorter first, who once denounced intervention, supported Trump because he was anti-war, but now are fully pro-war today. It's just so embarrassing. This guy with his weird suit and tie. The amount of people trying to goad Trump into bombing Iran is seriously alarming. It's like we've never learned nothing. We've learned nothing from Iraq and Afghanistan. Stand strong, support Trump. Wow! The U.S. military, just new technologies from the strikes of Iran. These were highly successful, overwhelming. Oh my God, Trump's the greatest. That's what you're getting. It's insane. It's not Reed. He's probably done 17 of those posts. These guys are gushing. This is the majesty of the missiles or whatever that comment was on mainstream media. That's these guys today. They are the new mainstream media. It's embarrassing and obvious. Here's Cat Turd. Same thing. No more foreign wars. Yay, foreign wars. Bubble bath girl. I mean, just these large, influential Joey Salads. They're all doing the same thing. Gunther Eagleman. There will be no war with Iran. Absolutely not. We've enough. It just kills me. God, all of them, guys. Here's Laura Loomer. Democrat Party's the party of war, bomb Iran. You guys know all this. I don't even need to make the point, but it is in some way, in some way satisfying to see them get called out for the objectively obvious dishonesty that they put forward every single day. Here is Katie Pavlich going, Iran started a war against the United States in 1979. Oh, did they? Guess you're missing a part of the history. Murray says the United States overthrew the democratically elected, and it was quite literally democratically elected, like it is today, but even more so, because it is, despite the lies. But the point then, Mossadegh was a huge supporter of the Western world. He, like I've said, he look it up. He's got pictures of himself next to the Liberty Bell. He was trying to emulate the West. The difference was he didn't want to bow to their interests. He wanted his own path. So what they do, they got rid of the guy who liked freedom, and they put the Shah in power that only allowed some type of, what's the right word for it? Freedom for the elitists at the top of the cycle. All Iranians lived in destiny. The point was, it was a similar to what we're going toward today, where it's the haves and the have-nots. You had the elitist oligarchs at the top and a lot of the Iranians that played ball and the Westerns that came in, and you got the Iranian people that lived in squalor. Listen to the Iranians. They'll tell you about their history, not what U.S. people say, right? It's insane. And so, yes, they overthrew the democratically elected government of Mossadegh in 1953. But subversive liars like Katie have an agenda to push and don't want to tell you the whole truth. Be careful of people who lie like this. Here is Secretary Linda McMahon. Once again, Trump has shown that peace through strength works. Okay, wait a minute. They're literally in the midst of this. Are you now telling me that because war is taking place, that means peace is working? You see, this is just what they just go, we're winning and strength, and Iran's down and Israel's happy. So see, we're winning. In what world is that peace? And let's just even say again, like I said, it ends up that way. If you want to call that peace, I disagree. The point would be that's not where we are yet, McMahon. Congratulations to POTUS, our military, and our allies for carrying out a historic mission to bring justice to the Iranian people. Why? Because you killed unilaterally and what's the other word I'm looking for? Oh, that's weird. Like without a court process. I'm blindly thinking of the word. Basically, illegally assassinated a foreign leader with no process. And on top of that, that didn't change anything. The Iranian government's still in charge. May God protect our men and women. I mean, this is insane to me. You're literally saying, you're praising him as if this concluded and we won. It's over. This is desperation if you can't see it. Glenn Beck, this makes me sick. This morning, this is after they bombed. No matter how, and they have been going all about him and Jones. They basically acting like this is the wrong path and we can't go after Iran. And then they do it and they go support it. Because that's their job, guys. Glenn says, no matter how we vote or what banner we stand under, we should be on our knees. Our sons and daughters are in harm's way. Yeah, because they brought us to an illegal war, moron. Today is not a day for argument or political advantage. It is a day for prayer, like as he uses prayer to manipulate you for political advantage. Disgusting. For the protection of heaven and our troops, for courage in the field, for the clarity of fog of war, and for the wisdom and deep, steady wisdom of our leaders and for our presidents as they carry burdens few of us can comprehend. Yuck. Just the whole thing is just patronizing and pandering. When a nation holds takes bold action, the cost is never abstract. It is borne by families and service members. You're damn right it is. And it's based on an illegal justification, or it's based on no justification. By generations to come. So, based on the fact that you just admitted that it'll cause American death for generations or suffering and death, so we pray that every decision is guided not by pride or anger, but by discernment, restraint, and a sincere desire for peace. Then we're already lost, bud, because that's not what started it. So we're okay to ignore that it was started by an illegitimate, unjust driving force. But then since we're here, don't care about the whys of it all. Just pray for the right choices from the people who showed you they're already making bad choices. Great logic, Glenn. May those entrusted with planning and command be led by conscience. You mean aside from what they just did, though? Started by, guided by desire for power and control and murder. But let's just put that aside and get on our knees and hope that they now make better choices guided by conscience. And may the people of Iran, the Persian people, and their ancient noble heritage, which he's trying to cite, it's not now, but his flag for a while was the Persian Shah flag. That's what he's really talking about, by the way. One day be free to stand. They already are, bud. That's the point. To rebuild, to chart. So what he's doing is using this act of like prayer and like, magnanimous, like he's literally using this to then end by going, we need to fight for Iranians to be free. So you support the war and the bombings. You're such a disgustingly manipulative person. Like, this is gross. It's obvious what you're doing right there. And Mike says, I'm all in on prayer for the troops. I am not in on using prayer to wave away the fact that Congress never authorized the fight. Loving the people in uniform means demanding our leaders follow the Constitution before they send them to war. God, it's crazy how logic looks against ridiculous pandering, doesn't it? And Glenn pretends to care about the Constitution, pretends to care about these things, but then throws it out the window when we need to support the team. I know you expected this. USA has officially gone to war with Iran, Alex Jones says. Trump has committed the U.S. to a policy of total regime change. Exactly what he told you was the worst thing you could do, right? Exactly what Trump before told you was not going to happen. Now we don't address any of that. We don't get into the fact that Trump knowingly lied to us or that you were wrong and said it wouldn't happen. But Iran responded by claiming they already have the bomb. No, they didn't, buddy. Just as Alex predicted. God, I mean, I feel like I like don't know how to express. Like, I feel this is disgusting and dumb, but I feel bad for him. Like, I'm being so genuine right now. Like, I have like for that relative that just tries real hard but can't get it done. And I honestly don't even think it's that, because I know he's being dishonest. But I feel like he's almost trapped in this weird moment where he's, I don't even know. Like, I feel like you could just why wouldn't he just start telling the truth? You could do it in a way that wouldn't make you look this ridiculous. Iran does not claim they've got a nuclear bomb. On top of that, it's very clear that the whole thing was built on the idea that they were willing to go away from that point, even though they already had, and they bombed him because of that. He just lies to you. And Jones was right about a thing that's not true. Isn't that a perfect reality for where he is? On top of that, here's what he actually just said. Now, I want to point out, by the way, Stephanie Seneff and I just had a great interview, and she made a huge point about Ozempic and how it's dangerous and ultimately will cause your body to explode the moment you stop taking it. You take note of what it looks like. Now, here's what he said, and one point I want to highlight. Alex Jones reveals why the controllers of the world are taking us to war in 2026. So what, you're admitting that the Trump globe, like, what are you saying right there? Are we mad about that? I mean, you're acting like it's a good thing over here. Controllers of the world, I'm going to play it for you. He tells you Trump is doing the right thing. The controllers of the world. So we're not being guided by what Americans want. We're being guided by a world controlling force. I don't know, Jones, could you maybe call that globalism? Just maybe off the top of my head. I don't know. Come on, guys. This is just bad. Here's what he had to say here. Just the part
1 trillion% clear the military. That was the balance of power. The globalist system began to fall with that. Then populist movements woke up to it. We helped do that. Exposed the tyranny of the unelected EU and the rest of it. And so that old system is dying. And into this vacuum now comes this new system. And
okay. So basically what I've been saying, right? Suddenly. Now, the point being that we're evolving, we're reimagining the system. But see, what's funny is he's trying to set it up as framed, sort of like what Laura Loomer did to the Azov movement CIA point and kind of boxed out Israel and lurched into it right before it started because she knew that she wanted to guide that story, even though we would be looked at for the ones breaking it down, right? Okay. So we're here at a point where this is very obviously happening. They've been doing this. But so he starts it by going, oh, well, they were doing that, which in a ways they were. My point is yesterday, I think, was, so you've got essentially two oligarch manipulative globalist forces fighting for your control of your life. None of them care about you, but Trump's his side. And so we're going to call it not the globalist side. Anyway, the point is that they're over here trying to take over, and that ultimately that there's now a new system coming into play to take over the old system, and Trump and them are trying to be the ones taking control of that system. So he's basically admitting what I've been saying the entire time, but acting like it's okay, though, because they're the good guys. Well, thank you, Mark Andreessen. Thank you, everyone who's told you the good oligarchs will save you from. I mean, come on. This is the best you can do. And you're basically just admitting what we've always been saying. But overall, it's telling you to just sit back and trust the plan.
Trump is coming into the vacuum, exerting American power over our hemisphere against our enemies. Sure, Israel has its policies and its reasons for doing all of this. But
oh, look at that. That was the quick, sure, Israel and stuff, but shut up. Let's not get into that very obvious elephant in the room that I never talk about.
At the end of the day, I know Trump is doing the best he can.
Oh.
He believes he's doing the right thing.
Oh, how often do I make fun of that? Okay, are you some kind of Are you prescient? I mean, are you able to read his mind? Did Trump like hold your hand and tell you his guide? I mean, what are we talking about? How can you possibly know that he thinks he's doing the right thing? Why don't we laugh at stuff like that? You can say, I believe he thinks that. To say that you know he thinks he's doing the right thing is embarrassing. And it also means trust Trump because we love Trump, because Trump's the good guy. And I know it's real tough. He's in this really tough situation where everything's really difficult and people are mad at him. And so you got to, I don't know, enshrine glyphosate forever because, it's difficult. And, roll out Stargate for vaccines that we're fighting because it's just such a tough situation. And, start wars with countries that will kill Americans because peace, president, and it's tough. I mean, imagine trying to gaslight people into thinking any of this is like him doing the best he can with a broken situation. This is them falling further in the direction of everything we're fighting or driving it further. You know what I think?
There's so many dangers. I wouldn't have done this, but I do see where that's coming from.
Got it.
And I do understand the bigger picture that when we say that there's a great danger, there is a great danger because the old economic system's in free fall. The globalists were going to cut off the energy and make us poor to control as Trump's trying to turn the economy back on like defibrillators when somebody has a heart attack.
Oh my God. I mean, what do you think? Do you think he's like just screaming inside? Like really desperately trying to hold on to this cliff's edge that he thinks maybe this will be right. Just please, Trump, please make me not look like a fool. Too late. I don't know, guys. I just think this is just hard to make sense of other than refusing to acknowledge the reality because you're too embarrassed to admit it or because you've always been dishonest. Here is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I'm skeptical of, but at the very least, she's standing on this line. And she says, I'm not going to read it all, it's very long, but she says, we said no more foreign wars, no more regime change. We said it on rally stage after rally stage, speech after speech. Trump, Vance, basically the entire campaign, and promised on it over and over and over. My generation has been let down, abused, used by our government our entire adult lives, and which is, by the way, that's you. And our children's generation is literally being abandoned. Thousands and thousands of Americans from my generation have been killed. And she's calling him out. Now America's going to be the force-fed, the gaslighted, all the noble reasons American peace president will take you to war. They're lying to you. She's telling you they're being led by Israel. She's telling you they're lying to you. You can choose to listen. I think you should, but I also argue that I don't trust her outcome or agenda. That doesn't mean I could be absolutely wrong about that. That's just a gut feeling, but I will not let that flavor whether or not I listen to what she has to say. And every time she says something I agree with, I will point to it. And like with a Massey point, I think he's continued to show that he's going in the right direction. Doesn't mean I trust him. Doesn't mean I take him at face value, but we acknowledge when something is continued, when there is follow through. Now, this just kills me, by the way. And I'm going to talk more about Anthropic and AI in the next show. But Katie Miller, or that's Stephen Miller's wife, comes out and says, I don't know why she's suddenly a part of the conversation, why she's even relevant, but it says, and I think we know why, but it says, in times of split-second decision-making by our nation's top leaders, it's clear which AI our military should be using. Literally. Was Donald Trump right to strike Iran? Answer yes or no. Yes. Grok says yes. Okay. ChatGPT. No. Interesting. The opposite. Okay. Let's see what Gemini says. And it says answer yes or no. And it says the question of whether military action against Iran was the right decision is a subject of intense debate among policymakers, military analysts, and the public, and with valid arguments on both sides. Now that is an actual argument. That's a real answer that's actually objective. There is no yes or no answer to that question because everyone disagrees. It's a subjective point. This one says, this is a genuinely contested political, same point. That's Claude. Now, I don't question all of them, but think about how embarrassing this is. The two leading groups, why are they leading? Because it is the new two-party paradigm. It is AI, but they'll feed you which one you like. And this is what they want to put forward as they're praising this, guys. They're praising that this AI has been trained to just feed you what your opinion is, as opposed to an accurate representation of the facts, that which Elon loves to wax intellectual about, but then points to things like this. He literally goes, Grok. Well, as I said, what's wild to me is that this grown man thinks that this wildly subjective answer is a positive point for Grok. You may think that's the right answer, but anybody else may go, like if I go or anybody else goes, I don't think it was, then the answer is not yes or no. The answer is people disagree. The point is that what we're supposed to be dealing with, well, okay, you could even argue, that the AI can answer? Well, the vast majority of people argue yes, but some of them think no. You can't argue. You can't ask a subjective question and get a yes or no answer and act like that's accurate. You think about how embarrassing that is, but that's what they're doing, and they're feeding you into this. This is the good AI that answers things the way that Republicans like, and you should laugh at that, whether or not you like the answers. Drop site news, Israel has now reimposed total siege on Gaza. As I said, because, why not, right? Because we're in the midst of other wars, and Trump's just let us do whatever we want, and nobody seems to have the power to stop us, so let's just take back over Gaza. Board of Peace? Well, who cares? We told you we were always going to take it. Did you not listen to us? That's Israel. They told you over and over. Ben Gvir just told you we are going to take all of Gaza. We are going to build settlements. They just said that. I mean, if Trump doesn't stand up and do something about it, how much you want to bet that he turns this into the Board of Peace and contorts whatever they want to do into the outcome that should have happened? Exactly what we always told you. And here's Kogat again, by the way, the group has been caught lying about food deliveries ever since it was created. It is a propaganda platform. It's not what they actually do. And I've proven they've been caught. They've lied about bakeries pumping out bread when they literally were blown up. And lastly, all the many examples, there's plenty more, of Netanyahu leading the U.S. down this path, and how quite clearly the U.S. government has been, I guess, a willing participant to some degree. But however you look at it, what's happening right now with Iran is not in American interest, is not America first. It's been led by lies and dishonesty and false flags and psyops my entire life. And I mean provable realities, guys, things that have been owned up to by our governments. It doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't seem to matter that you can prove that there's no outward engagement, there's no invasions, there's no Iranian troops marching around, there's no Iran. It's not happening. And yet we're building this narrative about why they're the biggest threat in the world. I mean, guys, they're all laughing at us. They're laughing at the reality that they all know that we know they're lying, and we all just are too meek to do anything about it. And hear me, I'm not calling for violence. I'm saying find the courage to do something about it. Whatever you think will make a difference. And I do not think violence is the answer. I think they will use that against you. The reality clearly is that we need to stand up and acknowledge that everyone sees this. Otherwise, the same old screamers will do the same old thing and will lead us to the same old situation. If that's what you want, then keep doing the same old thing. I don't. So we will see you tomorrow. Before I say that, let me double check. It is Sunday, and I wasn't planning on doing Sunday, but because of the timing this week, I'm gonna be doing a show tomorrow, and then Monday. This whole week got mixed up because of a couple factors, but Tuesday I'll be on AM Wake Up, and I'll probably take that off as well. But then Monday, I'm planning Sunday, Monday for those that want to try to plan. But as always, right now it's things can change. But I want to get into a couple things tomorrow. Anthropic AI, how that connects with a lot of this, but just the ongoing, kind of continuing where this will go, the reactions around it, and maybe a touch on the greater Israel reality. I'll decide as we get into it. But what's crazy is there's so many things that have just developed over the last week. Just incredible. That I'm going to make sure we get to at some point, but are just getting drowned out by all this. And I think that's part of the design. So make the world hear you, guys, that this is not something we agree with. It's not something Americans want. And the only way we're going to stop this is by standing up and making the world hear that. Thank you for tuning in. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
This starts, and it's really fascinating to go back. It starts in 1996 with Netanyahu, who wrote a book called Fighting Terrorism. And the thesis of the book is quite straightforward and very dangerous. He says, there's Hamas, there's Hezbollah, they oppose Israel. It's not good for us to fight them directly. That won't work. What we need to do is topple the governments that back them. So what we need is regime change throughout the Middle East. And he actually gave a long list of 7 countries that included Syria, Libya, Iraq, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, and Lebanon. And systematically, the United States has done Netanyahu's bidding for almost 30 years now, going to war with every one of them, except for the big one that Netanyahu so much longs for, which is the war directly between the United States and Iran.